In the night with live music and good company. Lee Summit, Missouri.
Welcome to the Lee Summit Sign Department. We are going to walk you through our process from start to finish. We make signs as needed here. It's not like we just go out into the field and place a speed limit sign here, no parking here. Our traffic engineers, they go through and they'll do field studies. They'll send us down an engineering work order for us to go out, place new signs or remove signs as needed. Coming from the material, our blanks come in and they're just aluminum blanks. We can put our white, our red, our fluorescent yellow, green, whatever. And basically what it looks like is just that there. Throw it up into the roller. And once we got it covered, take it to our work table here, and Tim will cut the corners, cut all the access off to where it's lined up right. As far as the plotter and the software that we use, there's a street name sign there, and he's gonna go ahead and print that out on the plotter so you can see the plotter and how it operates and runs. There's standards for the height, even just on letters on the sign blank. Basically what we have on the computer there is it's pretty much set up to those. And it goes through, it's got a very small but sharp needle that goes through and cuts everything out, letter by letter. Once that's done cutting, our next stage would be bringing it over here. Currently picking out the sign letters right now. We call it weeding or picking or however you want to call it. Next, putting it on the transfer tape. Then after it's taped, we bring it over to the roller. That's where we apply it to the actual sign blank. And we'll roll it through one time just to get the air bubbles out. And the last stage is basically just taking the transfer tape off the front of it. And there's a finished product of the street name sign. We'll take you out to the field and show you our process that we go through. We're gonna go out and follow our sign guys and get something installed for you. This is where we check our underground utilities. Tim, you got AT&T?
AT&T's back here.
Evergy, Google, so we should be good to go. We normally put all of our stuff together out in the field. Then once the base is installed, we'll go ahead and put the post in there. We've come up to perfect. And that's how we do it. Simple. Quick.
Traditionally, we think as police officers, those responding to law enforcement needs within the community. But honestly, we are there to serve our citizens, and our citizens do go into crisis. They do have mental health crises, and we're being called to those scenes on a regular basis. In order to help serve those citizens better, we did initiate the Crisis Intervention Team Program. These are officers that are specially trained to de-escalate crisis situations. Recently, we've brought co-responders onto the scene, licensed qualified mental health professionals housed within our police department, and they respond with those officers directly to those scenes where a crisis is occurring so they can interact with that citizen and get them the help they need right there on that scene.
The co-responders are either a bachelor or master level in a behavioral health related field. They wear plain clothes, they don't carry weapons or anything like that.
I have a police radio that I listen to all day. Listen for, those key words: mental health, behavioral health, crisis.
There's a lot of officers that just call for me. I have my own radio number.
I also have the ability to self-dispatch to them and say 982 is en route.
Officers en route, 914, Armstrong.
So typically I arrive after they've made it safe. I'll make contact and get kind of the rundown, and then I just kind of jump right in.
I'm like, hey, my name's Allison. I'm a mental health professional. I'm here to help you. I'm not here to take you to jail or arrest you.
Sometimes All a person needs is a voice, someone neutral, someone outside that, can listen. I do a lot of safety planning, including family, their support network, who's close to you. If they're home alone, who can come over and hang out with you today? Can we lock away your sharps? Can we put up your meds? Do you need meds? Can we get you over to the urgent care to get you assessed for your medications? Some of them also are like, oh, I'm so glad you came. This made me feel so much better.
Our main goal as co-responders is to, one, get people connected to the services that they need, and also divert from emergency rooms and jails.
And they almost get a different view of the police responding. That lets me know you care and the officers care.
Please, please, how can we help you?
My husband has...
In 2020, we had 722 mental health related calls for service. 2022, by that time, 1,479. These mental health related calls for service are increasing. How we're responding to that is increasing the number of crisis intervention team officers we have available, as well as the number of co-responders we have available to respond on these calls.
So what I think is important for the community to know about the co-responder program is that we're here, we exist. All you have to do when you call 911 is ask for us. Say, hey, I want a co-responder to respond to this crisis, and we'll go. I was really struggling about 8 years ago on my personal journey with mental health, and I met some amazing social workers and amazing programs that have helped me get to where I am today. I really couldn't see myself doing anything else. We want to help, and that's what we love to do.
So I had a client, we got a call, she had some suicidal ideations, and she really felt that she had nobody. And getting to know her story and getting to know who comes around and sees you, well, then we found a support person, and they responded immediately, and we made a plan. I called back and checked on her in an hour, and then I checked on her in 2 hours. We were able to get her into the additional services to where she talks to someone every week or more. I just took a person that really just thought they had nobody and nobody would show up for them, and show them you do. And you'll be amazed who is in your corner if you just simply say, I need a little help.
Good questions. Yes, Councilmember Edson.
Since this is a cooperative agreement, is this similar to like when we buy things through the mart?
It'd be similar. We don't buy through them.
We moved to Lee Summit right before we had our third child, and we ended up raising all 4 of our children here. And it's been just such a great place to raise kids. Well, I'd been involved in government and politics for a long time, different aspects of it. And then when I was raising my kids, I was very involved in different community organizations and involved with the schools. And as my kids got older, and I saw them and their friends starting to leave the community, I realized that there were some things that needed to be done in order to attract younger people back to Lee Summit, and I wanted to be part of that conversation. We need to work on economic development and keep trying to get more jobs here that pay well so that they will attract our kids. We have this great school system that we're all paying for, and yet our kids graduate and leave. We need to work with the school districts and with the businesses to create an environment that keeps our kids here. We have a great community with great housing, but we also don't have enough housing that is attainable for middle class. People who are just starting in the workforce can't afford to buy a house here at this point in time. If you take your average firefighter and your teacher and they're married, it's very hard for them to buy a house in Lee Summit. So some of my priorities when I ran were economic development, attainable housing, and public safety. When I ran 6 years ago, our police officers and our firefighters were some of the worst paid public safety folks in the metro area. And in the past 6 years, we've done a great job of getting their pay up, getting their benefits up, and now there will be a public safety tax, which will be a game changer for Lee Summit. It will help us to attract and retain new talent for the coming years. All communities are having a hard time recruiting and retaining police and firefighters. So if we can be a place that they want to come and is desirable, it's going to be great for the well-being of our community. We need to make sure that not only are we paying people well, but that we have enough fire stations as the city grows. We need to make sure that we grow the police department. Something else I'm really proud of, the replacement of Fire Station 4 and 5. I started taking council members on tours of Fire Station number 4 to show them how badly a replacement for that station was needed. There are so many opportunities to get involved in this community, whether it's serving on a committee, whether it's participating in the Citizens Leadership Academy, which the city sponsors. It's easy to sit at home and complain and think you understand how it works, and then when you actually understand how it works, you have a better appreciation for it, and you'll want to get involved more. I just wanted to clarify that. I think Hillary did a great job. Thank you.
Welcome, everyone. Would you please rise for the invocation and stay standing for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Heavenly Father, we are assembled here tonight to make decisions and create an example for others to follow. Give us as leaders guidance and courage to do what is right for our city. Allow us to have clear minds to fulfill our task as we work for the betterment of our community. Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States, for which it stands, one nation, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, again, welcome everyone. I'm calling to order the City of Lee Summit regular session number 64. Can I get a roll call, please?
Councilmember DeMauro.
Here.
Councilmember Felker.
Here.
Councilmember Lovell.
Here.
Councilmember Edson.
Here.
Councilmember Pryor.
Here.
Councilmember Shields.
Here.
Councilmember Hodges.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Lopez.
Here.
Mayor Baird.
Here. First thing on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Can I get a motion? I have a motion to adopt the agenda by Councilmember DeMauro, seconded by Councilmember Shields. Discussion? Seeing none, please cast your vote.
Mayor, I'm an aye.
Okay.
I'm an aye also, Mayor.
Councilmember Felker and Lopez are ayes. Thank you. All votes are in. Please record the vote. It's adopted. Thank you. Next is the approval of the consent agenda. I have a motion to adopt the consent agenda by Councilmember Shields, seconded by Councilmember Edson. Discussion? Seeing none, please cast your vote.
Aye, Mayor.
Mayor Pro Tem Lopez is an aye. Councilmember Felker is an aye. All votes are in. Please. Oh, no, I'm missing one. Oh, me. There we go. All votes are in. Please record the vote. It's adopted. Thank you. And that takes us to Council Roundtable. These are items of general interest, things going on in the community. Yes, Councilmember Shields.
Thank you, Mayor. Lee Summit Social Services is having their pancake breakfast this Saturday. I believe it is going to be at Bridge Space this year. So hope everybody can come out and support them.
Excellent. Thank you. Councilmember Edson.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I can't believe anybody hasn't chimed in about the Super Bowl and the parade tomorrow. But not to harsh everybody's mellow, but we have this big event taking place tomorrow, and the KCATA is providing shuttle service again, so not everyone has to go downtown. Except, once again, they are not coming out to eastern Jackson County. The furthest east they are coming is Swope Park and the zoo. So we have the sports complex, we have independent centers, which would make great shuttle stops, but KCATA is going to serve people in Overland Park, but not serving the people in eastern Jackson County. So I just wanted to say that publicly. But go Chiefs.
Yeah. Should be fun to watch. But that's sad, because I know a lot of people like to go. All right. Any other items of general interest? All right, then that'll take us to public comments. We have a couple of public commenters. We'll start off with Mr. McCoy.
My name's Taylor McCoy. I'm a co-owner of Jim's Tow with my brother Mike here. We wanted to make ourselves available to you if you had any questions or concerns regarding the city's tow contract that you guys will be talking about later. We are excited and we're ready to work for this contract and look forward to any questions that you guys have. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next up is Ms. Vollenweider.
Teresa Vollenweider, 5201 Northeast Maybrook Road. A continuation of searching for the truth via uncovering the lies. This will be a continuation from the last meeting. I got this from the county. This should probably help a little bit to understand that 533 feet west line that Bob Anderson somehow totally moved. And what he did was he took this line, this is the 533 feet line, and it divides this whole piece, this whole southeast quarter of the northeast quarter. So he took this line and he moved it about there, because he, I'm guessing, wanted it to line up with what the city likes to call my westerly point of my land. Unfortunately, this is a case of the plan is merely a picture. The survey is the substance. What is on the ground controls. And you'll find, looking at Bob Anderson's plat, looking at his road revisions, that he puts pins down in the ground or shows pins in the ground that they put in the ground that when you go out there, they do not exist. And I asked the company that did my survey, Alta Survey, twice, did you find any pins along there? No. Did you find any pins along there? No. And what I've learned in the classes I've taken is the reason surveyors will not put pins in the ground is because they don't think if they get taken to court that they've got any evidence to support that those pins should be there. This is the road revision done by Jim Anderson. He did the first one. It got signed and sealed June 13th, 2019. So pin there, pin there, pin, pin. Not in the ground. Not there. And note that he puts the deed, either he did or somebody from Public Works did it, slaps this that this is the deed from 2016. Nope, it's the deed from 2013. And the 2013 deed is what? It's the one that has except that part in Maybrook Road. And when you're trying to get a sanitary sewer line from over here to over here, you got to come across the road. One way or another, you got to get across that road. And if somebody doesn't own the land there, they can't give you an easement. So why don't you just move the line and put it that it's a different deed and make it work? Ultimately, what this is all about is a sanitary sewer line, and Bob Anderson did the same thing. He's got a road revision survey too, dated 10/22. He got the line in the right place this time. So it's not as though he didn't know it was supposed to be there. He knew it was supposed to be there. But on the plat, he moved it. For the first plat, the preliminary plat, and the final plat, he moved it. But on the road revision, here we go, is the CYA on the 40-foot right-of-way. Basically, we have no evidence to say there's 40 feet. So we're covering ourselves, and we're going to put this down here so that if somebody takes us to court, we can say, hey, but that didn't make it on the plat. That was hidden on this road revision survey that wasn't recorded at the county.
All right, thank you, Ms. Vollenweider. Okay, next we have proclamations. So, I see some employees from the communications department. Would you guys want to come forward and read this with me? Hello. How are y'all? Oh. Put them from the, oh, here they come. Yeah, keep coming this way.
It's okay. We have a whole dice. Nobody wants to say.
I'm like, what is going on? Everyone keeps moving. What is doing?
Okay, here we go. Whereas the role of government communications is to inform, educate, and engage the communities they are funded by and serve in a transparent way so that citizens might be more connected and involved with the processes of the local, state, and federal governments. Whereas Government Communications Day acknowledges the dedication of communicators across various levels of government, recognizing their commitment to providing information to the public in a way that is helpful and easy to understand. And whereas government communications create relationships and calls to action, build awareness and understanding through storytelling, engage and foster engagement on civic issues, and utilize all channels to include people in critical decisions. And whereas it is essential to have strong communication in government because it is the foundational element of living in a democracy where citizens have the freedom to make their voices heard. And whereas effective communication is necessary for enhancing public trust and understanding of government initiatives so that citizens served are informed, educated, and engaged. Whereas the City of Lee Summit expresses pride, deep gratitude, and recognition for government communications, communicators, professionals, dedication, hard work, commitment, enthusiasm, and sacrifice. By virtue of the authority vested in me as the mayor of the City of Lee Summit, I do hereby proclaim February 24th, 2024 as Government Communicators Day. Can I get a round of applause? There we go. All right. I will let you speak first.
Okay. Cheryl Nash, Director of Creative Services. We are so excited that we have a day. Oh my gosh, we've never had a day before, and it's funny that it's on Saturday, so that's even funnier. So we're very excited about it, and I appreciate everyone up here. They do a lot of the work behind the scenes, the people that you don't see that are working to get the word out to our internal employees as well as the community at large. So we're very excited about it. So.
Can we go down the line and your name and your position?
Colin McCage, Communications Strategist.
Laura Ingeman, Marketing Specialist.
Jordan Byers, Marketing Specialist.
Josh Cumden-Ellis, Media Services Supervisor.
Melissa Vanden-Steel, Marketing and Communication Strategist for Parks and Recreation.
Madison Seeger, Marketing Communications Specialist with Parks and Recreation.
Matt Bowles, AV Production Specialist.
Jacob Lesh, AV Production Specialist.
Jim Eden, Assistant Chief and Public Information Officer for the Fire Department.
I do have one more thing. So it is Valentine's Eve, right? And so if you haven't got your LS cup for your loved one and you're a last-minute shopper, we have these. So, and I also wanted to give one to the mayor. Hopefully your wife isn't watching and give her that for Valentine's Day. So.
My daughter's going to be really jealous.
Yay.
I'll take a photo with it, too. All right, where are we now? We are on presentations. And we have a presentation on the regional landfill capacity study. Mark is here. Looks like Tom Jacobs is here to give us a presentation.
Tom Jacobs. I work with Mid-America Regional Council. Thank you. I appreciate the invitation to join you tonight and to share information about a regional landfill capacity study that the Mid-America Regional Council and the Mid-America Regional Council Solid Waste Management District carried out in the last several months of last year. The issue came to the fore with all of the discussions about the siting of a proposed landfill in South Kansas City. And so we asked the question, how much landfill capacity do we have in the region as a framing question to understand solid waste trends and management issues around the region. So I'll just spend a few minutes walking you through the study. In terms of the background, I'll share a little bit about background on the Solid Waste District and our consultant, Burns & McDonnell, and share how the study moved forward and finally the results. But the clincher for this, the headline is the need for a new landfill is not imminent. According to our study, we have a projected 19 to 37 years of remaining landfill capacity, depending on what assumptions you make. And I'll walk you through what the assumptions were that gave rise to that range of potential landfill capacity remaining. And the biggest outcome of the study, perhaps, is a recommendation that the MARC and the MARC Solid Waste Management District initiate a revision, an update to a regional solid waste management plan, and we would do that beginning this year. So the background on the study, the MARC Solid Waste District is one of 20 multi-county districts in the state of Missouri. We serve 5 counties on the Missouri side of the state line. I was thinking back about this when I first joined MARC as the planner for the Solid Waste District. Councilman from Lee Summit, Charlie Plank, was the chair of the district and was succeeded many years later by Chris Buston, who provided strong leadership for the district as well. So we've had a lot of opportunities to interact with the city of Lee Summit on these issues over the years. The district does a whole lot of different things. In addition to beginning to update the regional solid waste plan, we run the regional household hazardous waste collection program in close coordination with the city of Lee Summit and the city of Kansas City, Missouri. We give away north of $500,000 a year of waste reduction and recycling grants. We provide technical assistance to a lot of different entities. We run recyclespot.org, so you can figure out where to recycle anything you might have in your kitchen or in your home, and work on food waste reduction, illegal dumping, and a host of other issues. We're non-regulatory, which is an important disclaimer at the front end of the conversation. We have no regulatory authority. We don't have any role in the development, siting, or expansion of landfills or waste transfer stations, because those issues are governed by state and local permitting and zoning processes. In this instance by the Missouri Department of Natural Resources in the city of Kansas City, Missouri. So our role is advisory, it's facilitative, and we try and frame issues to find shared answers to complex problems. We had a competitive procurement leading us to retain the services of Burns & McDonnell. They have strong skill set in this area, and one of the things that was noteworthy is their practice exclusively works with state and local governments, so they avoid conflicts of interest with private sector vendors. So we conducted this study moving at a sprint. We got underway in October and wrapped it up at the beginning of January. Along the way, we had focus groups with public and private sector leaders, folks who are involved in the industry on the public side from Lee Summit, from Kansas City, from Olathe, Johnson County, and others, and also with private sector leaders from waste management industry. We wanted to share our initial results and make sure that folks on both the public and private sides of the aisle were comfortable with the assumptions that we were making, and so we could move forward knowing that we were we were aligned with thinking in the industry. There were some comments that were shared, and we used those. We adjusted our analysis accordingly. We finalized this study in early January, and have since presented it at a large gathering at Longview Community College, here tonight, last week or two in Kansas City, Missouri, at their city council, and there's been a tremendous amount of interest in it. So the purpose of the study, what is it? It's to inform regional planning. It's not part of the permitting process, like I said. It's not a study of any particular landfill expansion or proposed landfill. It's intended to inform state and local decision-making and inform regional planning or local planning, and we view it as a prelude to revising the regional solid waste management plan. So you probably don't need too much information about what landfills are or transfer stations. Our study took a broad look at landfills and transfer stations that serve our metro area. The green stars, there are 7 green stars that reflect landfills that serve our waste shed here in the metro area. From Sedalia all the way to Topeka and as far north as St. Joe, and there's a significant number of transfer stations as well. So these are the landfills that were looked at as part of this study, and you can see here the 3-year average acceptance rate from each one and the remaining capacity for each of them as well. And these figures serve as a set of baseline information for our study. There's roughly similar annual acceptance rates in Kansas and Missouri, but Kansas has a lot more remaining capacity. So our landfill capacity scenarios. There are, let's see, there are 5 variables that we played with to develop different scenarios for to project future capacity. The first one is population growth. The second is expanded capacity scenarios. So we asked the question, what would happen if some of the existing landfills expanded their capacity? How would that affect things? The third one is there's a proposed landfill or a landfill in Sedalia called Presidio landfill that's in the permitting process now. And if and when that comes online, how will that affect things? Then the last 2 variables we looked at are how much waste are we diverting from landfills? How much are we recycling? How much waste reduction is there? What's our composting rates? What will that do to things? And finally, and this was the one that came out of our focus group discussions, there was a suggestion that we are underestimating waste generation rates, and so we created a scenario at the end to bump those up a little bit to see what would happen. So this is my money slide, and I'll walk you through it. So we developed 11 scenarios. We probably could have created many more because there's so many different permutations here. The first one has no population growth, no expansion. Presidio doesn't come online. There's no additional waste diversion. There's no additional waste generation. So in that scenario, we'd have almost 26 years of remaining capacity. Of course, we know the population's going to grow, so using population growth statistics from the Census Bureau, we would project then that we'd have 2 fewer years of remaining landfill capacity. And then we go down the chart, and scenarios 3 and 4 both project some increased levels of landfill expansion. One of them would add 10 million cubic yards and the other 20 million cubic yards. And those are just layered on top of population growth without changing any of the other variables. And in those instances, in each case, we bump it up a couple more years. So a final year of capacity would end in 2048 or 2050. On the 5th scenario, we show population growth and the Presidio landfill comes online. And that gives us a good bump up. For scenarios 6 and 7, we include population growth, landfill expansion, and the Presidio landfill. For scenarios 8 and 9, we add additional waste diversion. So on top of what the current waste diversion rates are, we bump that up 10 or 20%. So this scenario number 9 is our most optimistic scenario. It would show us with roughly 37 years of remaining capacity. And let's see, the 10th scenario It takes out the expansion, it bumps us down a little bit. And then based on the focus group comments, we added a scenario asking the question of, you know, what happens if we bump up waste generation rates, if people throw away more stuff tomorrow than they do today. And in that scenario, this is our most conservative estimate with just under 20 years of remaining capacity, of 19 years of remaining capacity. So the one thing I can tell you about all of this is that every one of these numbers are wrong. If you do any modeling of any kind, you know that all models are wrong. But we feel we have some confidence that we're providing to you a range of that's a realistic range. The assumptions were the folks in our focus groups were comfortable with them. Our consultants were comfortable with them. They feel like it reflects the state of the industry, and somewhere between 19 and 37 years is a likely estimate. So there's some graphics here. I don't really like them very well, so I'm not going to stay with them very long. This one reflects scenario number one, the one with no projected growth and no additional landfill capacity, and it shows where the waste might flow over time until all of that capacity is used up. There were charts like this developed for each one of these scenarios, and I won't belabor them at all. The second one that was, it shows the final year that each of these different landfills would close. So this was the best case scenario, that scenario number 9. It took us all the way to just about 2060. So a summary of the study, it would be as follows. We believe that there's anywhere from 19 to 37 years of remaining landfill capacity. There's other variables that we might have considered and different combinations of the variables that I shared with you that could yield different kinds of projections. So there's always uncertainty, but we feel comfortable with the numbers we're sharing. The study recommends that we undertake a revision to the regional solid waste plan. And why would we do this, right? We don't believe that a need for a new landfill is imminent, but siting landfills is hard. It's slow. It takes a lot of time, and so it wouldn't be prudent for us to sit on our hands. We need to really consider what are the things that we might want to do as a regional community in terms of looking at disposal capacity. What are the strategies and what's the infrastructure needed to bump up recycling rates or composting or to increase reuse or to increase waste reduction. And so that we would contemplate a significant community engagement process and go through a planning process to set goals and objectives and assess the different strategies so we can understand what kinds of impacts we might have, whether it's in terms of the flow of solid waste or if it's financial impacts or regulatory impacts and so forth, and figure out how we can get to where we want to go. So to wind this up, we know that siting landfills and transportation takes a while. We need to figure out how we want to handle our solid waste moving forward. And we know that as we undertake this additional planning, we can make a big difference in starting to bump up our recycling and composting and reuse rates that'll buy us a bit of time and help us along a path of embracing kind of sustainability and resilience in ways that provide all kinds of community benefits. So I'd stop there. These are some of the sources that we used for the data that was used for the projections, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you. We have questions for you. Councilmember DeMoro.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Jacobs. Very, very, very informative. Thank you for your presentation. I do have one question. The Presidio landfill, I know there's a lot of opposition, and believe me, and I think everybody on this dais understands the opposition to that. Where is that in the permitting process? Has that started? Is it halfway through, or?
I'm afraid I can't answer your question as thoroughly as I would like. I could find out that information for you. I know that the developer of that landfill, of course, is very bullish on his process and believes that he'll have an opportunity to open, in 2026 or 27. So that might give you a time frame, right? So he's 3 or 4 years out from finishing his studies and getting going. There are those who take a more cynical view about that, and there's public debate underway. So that's, if you'd like, I could find out more for you and report back.
If you would, please, and just a follow-up question. With the Presidio in there, the largest, or the longest duration is 37.5 years if it gets permitted and starts, correct? I mean, it's not going to go based on this, and like you said, this is a model that is subject to change.
One of the issues of discussion in our focus groups had to do with how much capacity do you think we'll have in the future? And a lot of that discussion revolved around two facilities in particular, HAM out by Lawrence and Presidio. Presidio's permit is asking for something in the neighborhood of 18 million cubic yards of space. I think I'm close on that. And but the developer has a long-range plan that might be 9 times that number. So, and similarly, HAM is sitting on north of 500 acres of land, and they have ample opportunities to expand. So, depending on what happens with those two facilities, could potentially expand the lifetime of remaining capacity significantly. We didn't go out that far. There's arguments that could be made against those eventualities, and we wanted to use conservative assumptions in our estimates. But there's lots of possibilities there.
Thank you, Mr. Jacobs. Appreciate it. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Edson.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for coming tonight. I really appreciated this presentation. Toward the end, you were talking about recycling and composting. But in the past several years, we've had problems getting haulers to pick up or to accept or bid on recycling contracts with the city because they can't make any money off of it. Is that starting to change, or do you have any suggestions on how to change that?
I definitely don't have a crystal ball. The markets are incredibly volatile. Some years back, when China effectively closed its markets, that undercut prices, right? And there's significant problems with contamination of recycling commodities that is a challenge for folks in the recycling markets. It feels like there are increasing market outlets in this country and in other countries that folks are finding, but it's but it is volatile, and so it's one of those sets of factors that I think we need to take into account as if we want to really bump up our diversion rates. Well, how do we do that? Can we create any end markets here in Kansas City supporting industry that use recycled materials as feedstock in their manufacturing processes? That would probably be that'd be a home run for us if we could figure that out.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Well, the report's been valuable for us for other reasons that you are probably well aware, so it's been great to have a snapshot and to be able to communicate to other legislature, state, and more. So, thank you for your hard work on this and your presentation.
Thank you.
Yep. All right, next we have a presentation. This is, we're going to have a discussion on the Lee Summit Economic Development Council status and report. And we've got Mr. Bill Brown here, the Vice Chair of the LSEDC, as well as Teresa Evans, the Interim Executive Director.
Good evening, and thank you. I'm William Brown, Vice Chairman of the Lee Summit Economic Development Council. Appreciate the invitation to appear before the City Council tonight. City Manager Mark Dunning contacted me last Wednesday at the behest of the Mayor and asked if I would speak on behalf of the Board of Directors, and so I'm here in that capacity tonight. Mark clued me in on some of the discussion that occurred at last Tuesday's council meeting, and he said there were questions and comments, and we think that we'd like you to come and maybe talk about some of those and provide some of the perhaps or answers to the questions that were raised. So I do want to be careful that when I'm speaking here tonight, I'm attempting to characterize the thoughts of members of the board of directors, and not all of them, a majority of them, primarily the private sector investors that represent the business community. So there are no approved talking points per se, but we've had a lot of discussion back and forth amongst us in the last week. Again, I want to be careful, so in the course of my appearance tonight, if I speak as an individual investor of the EDC or simply as a community stakeholder, I will attempt to note that distinction between any direction that I receive from our board of directors and my own thoughts. I do want to recognize the fact Tom Jackson, a board member, is here. Mayor had also mentioned Teresa Evans, who's our interim executive director. So let me, I think, start by offering, maybe this gets to the heart of some of the dialogue last week, that we as a board were of the mindset that since the work session in mid-October, that we, council and the EDC Board of Directors, were in general agreement with the pathway forward, an initiative that we have come to generally refer to as the reset. That reset had a series of actions to be undertaken by the EDC. And while the schedule that was proposed at that mid-October meeting while that has slipped, we have been working as a group with proposed action items in mind. And so those actions have included the formation of a bylaws working group that involved the private sector representatives from the board of directors, the mayor and the city manager, 2 city council persons, a former EDC chairman, and a representative from the Kansas City Area Development Council, which is the regional economic development agency that's charged with representing the interest of a 2-state, 18-county greater Kansas City region. We thought that with that makeup, we would be able to have a robust discussion and a look at what would be the best bylaws that we could possibly have for the organization and drive us forward. And so we met after that group was formed. We did retain counsel, the firm of Dysart Taylor, who was brought into the process to assist in the review and provide legal counsel in shaping the bylaws. That review process is over, and I think I did hear from the 2 council persons that were part of that. It was a good working dialogue, and we made progress, I think, and addressed some of the concerns that we had heard. And that had to do a lot with the makeup and the composition of the board going forward. So we heard that, and the draft includes a number of those changes. So that review is over. We went ahead and presented that to the board of directors for their review at last Tuesday's meeting. So that was the first time the full board had actually gotten that updated copy. We had circulated drafts in between, just as we had within the working group, and we continued to keep the rest of the board that was not on the working group in the loop. Now then, prior to actually completing the final draft of the bylaws, we also began work on the creation of an economic development strategic plan for the community. Again, that was one of the items that we had in our proposal for the reset. It was actually the second action that we said that we would undertake. So as a board, we met and discussed how we would go about that. And so we sought and received commitments to that process from the Lee Summit Chamber of Commerce, Downtown Lee Summit, R7 School District, the City of Lee Summit, Metropolitan Community College, and the University of Central Missouri here at the Missouri Innovation Campus. The body of work to be utilized in those initial discussions would be the May 23 report from the Thomas Miller Best Practices, a study that had been asked for by the City of Lee Summit, and the 2022 Lee Summit Strategic Plan. Now, we had adopted that as a board a few months ago. We used those really as a body of work to respond to. We had no preconceived notions but about how that strategic plan would look. But there were two pretty good reports that could really move the group forward, we thought, and provide a sound source on which to develop a strategy that would have buy-in from the stakeholders that were a part of that discussion, who are key partners in economic development here in Lee Summit. So an initial meeting of these stakeholders, and we had to reset that time a couple of times, trying to make sure that we had representation from all the groups on a particular date at a particular time. I know there's some criticism about we move very slowly. We apologize for that, but the fact is when you're trying to get that many schedules lined up in a very specific period of time, sometimes things don't go like you want them to. So we were planning on meeting Thursday night and kick off that process. And so that was the second piece that we were moving towards and trying to coordinate that. We also agreed as a board that we would hire the firm of Marks Nelson to assist in that endeavor. Now, I didn't know who Marks Nelson was before we started talking about this, and it was suggested by our superintendent at the R7 school district. And frankly, when you look at what they've done a lot of work across a lot of different units of local government, primarily in doing exactly this kind of thing. And so we had a number of discussions. I did individually, but we also had Steve Etcher, who was the representative of that, participate in some of our board meetings and talk through our goals so that he had a firm grasp of what it was that he might be employed to do. So last Tuesday, again, we had said, let's move forward with that. Everything looks like it's lining up. We've got a meeting next Thursday, which he was familiar with, and let's go ahead, and we talked about a contract. So we voted formally to go ahead and have a contract for me to move forward and to execute a contract with Marks Nelson. Now again, some of the question was, why are we having another consultant? Haven't we already done this? Well, there's a couple of reasons here. And it goes to some of the other comments that were made. We have one person that is employed at the EDC right now, and I want to talk about that a little bit later. That's all we have. Marks Nelson is effectively, around this process, going to be our staff that continues to send the meeting notices out, that does the minutes of the meetings, puts together any future drafts of a document and that kind of thing. So we don't have the staff to really execute this, and that's why we were going to contract that. The other thing is, this is a very different process and product that we hope to come out of this than what the best practices study was. Very, very different. There's some good things in that best practices, and the idea was that we incorporate that into how we function going forward with economic development, but it is not a roadmap in terms of what we in this community ought to be coming together to do collaboratively in order to achieve our economic development goals. That is what the strategic plan was about. It wasn't a study and a review of best practices. That had already been done. So again, very different use of consultants in this, but it's like anytime you hire somebody, who's the subject matter expert? Who can we go to when we don't have the ability to source all of this internally? We weren't doing anything different when we talked about hiring Marks Nelson. So the idea, again, if we go back to the reset document, we felt it necessary to address a couple of the things that we had heard in our discussions and wanted to use the opportunities for a needed buy-in to the development of a new public service agreement. We thought we're not going to get to a new PSA discussion unless we're able to come together, do the bylaw review, come together again and collectively decide, here's the strategic plan that is going to move the community forward. Those two things we thought important to happen before we came back and said, okay, can we start talking about metrics around a new PSA and a funding agreement with you? So that was the order that we decided to proceed. So that's kind of where we are right now. Again, the bylaws draft is done. It's been presented to the board. And we were planning on having that initial meeting of the strategic plan group on Thursday night. So that's kind of the update quickly on two of the points that we had in the proposal that we made as part of the reset in mid-October. So, and again, I've watched the video of last week's meeting a couple of different times, and I know that I've talked with some of you individually. And the question is, what have you done as a board of directors or as an organization since the PSA agreement was terminated? You guys just been sitting around, or what's been going on? Because we don't see anything. Fair question, but I've got to say that during the period since the termination, there's several things we did. The board was not functioning as a board. I think we've now got the trust level and the working relationship on that board now is about as good as any board that I've ever seen. And I've been on a number of boards in my career. I think that group works very well together and has been very committed to seeing this process through. So we've been meeting regularly on a monthly basis again. That was a past problem that wasn't happening, and that was one of the first things that the group addressed. I think within that, it's also important to note that, and we had this discussion as a group, that despite the respective decisions that were made by the city and the Lee Summit R7 School District to terminate the PSA and the Memorandum of Understanding and the funding streams that went with those, we determined that the appropriate course was to continue to have representatives of those groups participate in the discussion. The idea was, how can we possibly move forward if we don't have those entities represented and participating? And we had that discussion, and that was unanimity. Nope, we need everybody here. That wasn't what was whispered in my ear by folks on the outside, many of them investors. But again, our board said we need to keep working together, and that was the path that we decided to move forward in. I'll say this, I've said it privately, publicly, I think we've said it here, probably said at the working meeting that we had. The EDC board acknowledged the stumbles and the shortcomings that led to the PSA being pulled and recommitted to improving the areas that were noted and of concern. The mea culpa was taken. There was a recommitment going forward. I'm not sure how many times that we could restate that, but that has been said several times over. We admitted there were mistakes that's made. Again, a lot of discussion about looking forward, and that's really what we've been trying to do, as well as address some of the shortcomings that were pointed out. So we agreed that many of the criticisms were valid. I would point out, though, and I was not on the board at that time, but this organization had a proven track record of value in the community, and I would argue that the organizational failures that may have occurred over a relatively brief period of time, when you take into account the 4 decades that this organization has existed, ought to be part of the discussion and, to me, part of the dialogue that we have going forward. I'm also not going to use the COVID issue and the shutdown that occurred as an excuse, but look, the pullback of activities at that time by the EDC came just at the same time that we were doing this nationally. We had a virtual shutdown of our society in an effort to cope with the pandemic. There were a lot of meetings that were canceled. There were a lot of meetings that weren't held. There was a lot of interaction that wasn't going on. It wasn't just the EDC. Not using that as an excuse, but that did happen during COVID. So a lot of the criticism and the period that's mentioned was, in fact, during the COVID period. This is where I'll speak as an individual. And I think I've mentioned this to several of you individually. I was a very disaffected investor myself. I was not happy with what the EDC was doing. I did not like the lack of meetings. I'm not sure how you can go to a quarterly meeting of the board of directors and meet 4 times and be engaged and try to lead an organization that has a leading role on economic development in your community. So I wasn't happy either. I ended up coming back on the board when a good friend of mine became the chairman, and he then was faced with leading the organization after the PSA funding had been pulled, and I said, Will, let me try and help you out. I've been through this. I was on that executive committee for 5 years. If there's a way I can do it, let me know. The vice chairmanship role opened up, and that's how I became on the board. So my time is a little bit limited to a little more recent history, but again, I was not happy with where the EDC was going either. And again, a lot of the criticisms I think were very valid. So during that time, or since that time, a couple of things have happened. We had the retirement of the organization's president, Rick McDowell, and then we retained Teresa Evans as an interim executive director, not a president, an executive director. And that happened in late 2022, and we continued to extend that contract through its current date in 2024. Now, Teresa had previously served at the EDC in the number 2 position when Jim Devine was the president, and those were some of the most productive years that EDC had ever had. So many of us knew Teresa, and she also had experience working with the Blue Springs Economic Development Council, as well as working at the State of Missouri's Department of Economic Development. So we asked her to kind of step in the fray and help us out, is how I would characterize the conversations that we had with Teresa, to be the staff person that would come on, help provide direction. I think by the time she came on, we were already down a couple of head count, but we still had a couple of people working at the EDC. So her primary tasks were going to be to focus on business retention and expansion, workforce development, and business attraction. None of us intended for Teresa to be an interim executive director for these many months when we initially asked her to step into the fray. So again, to the question of what were you doing these many months, which I noted was a theme of last week's council discussion, as part of the board's deliberation concerning the creation of a path forward, and I know Mark said this last week in his comments, the board was asked by the mayor and the city manager to allow time and consideration of the city's initiation and completion of an assessment of economic development best practices and to support and engage in that effort. The city contracted with Thomas P. Miller to conduct the best practices economic development study to ascertain how other similar-sized communities organize their economic development practices. The board agreed to support that effort and to await its findings and recommendations. So we weren't sure how long that was going to take. I'm not sure anybody did. But when we signed on, we said, all right, we're not going to have the PSA discussion then, okay? We're not going to chart a new course. We won't do a lot of different things because we're going to hold in abeyance until we see what the report has to say. And we will take part in the process as well while that happens. So I don't know if everybody remembers, but the process took place over a significant period of time in 2023, a significant portion of 2023. And then it was finalized with the report to the City Council at the September 26th meeting of the council. Again, the guidance was to await the findings of the study before we could have an engagement with the city about a plan and a codification of that plan in the form of a new PSA and funding. Now, while that was going on and before that September 26th, we were asking in these board meetings, is there any update about what's going on with the consultant? When we had the community meeting, and I know that we talked about that, it was a great meeting. But if you remember, everybody handed in their pencils and paper at the end of the night. There was no record of what was done that night. There was no roll-up of any discussion items, any recommendations, any prioritization of what economic development should look like in Lee's Summit. When we asked about it at the board and executive committee meetings, we were told, our staff is working with the consultant, we'll have a report. It then became, we're going to do the report, and you guys will be able to see that when it comes out. So that was, again, part of it. So we're buying into the process. We're participating. But the feedback loop in terms of what's going on, again, we're sitting there going, okay, we told you we'd buy into this, but we're not getting a whole lot of feedback in terms of what's going on. So we then get to the 26th meeting, and the report, The Future of Economic Development in Lee's Summit, advocated for, 1, the facilitation of a merger between the Lee's Summit Economic Development Council and the Lee's Summit Chamber of Commerce, or the launching of a new economic development organization. Well, you might imagine our reaction to that. So we were asked to stand down. We did engage. We did not have a heads up of what the recommendation was going to be until we heard it come from the consultant that night. And that is that we recommend you guys either got to get together with the chamber or we're going to start a new EDC. Okay. So after waiting for most of the year for the study to be completed and made public before being able to proceed, we were clearly a bit stunned with that recommendation. You might also remember that in arriving at that recommendation, the consultant had had no interaction with any of the members of our board. None of our investors had not reached out and had that discussion with the Chamber of Commerce or their board of directors. And you're just kind of scratching your head going, how did we get here? So again, we were taken a bit off stride with all of that. I think you might even remember when the consultant was pushed about that recommendation, he actually said, well, you've got something going here. I wish you guys would figure out how to work together better, because what you have is a pretty good model. That gets lost in a lot of the discussion since that time. But he actually backtracked on the recommendation that he made. And the rationale for the recommendation was unspoken. He never was able to say that night, and it's not in the report, why we should go down one of the two paths that they recommended. Again, if you're on the board, you're kind of looking at this going, this just doesn't feel right, but okay. That led to then that October 18th meeting, because we said we'd like to meet with the full council and have this discussion, because heretofore we hadn't had that. We're not part of any of the consultation in putting together the best practices. Did not have any idea what the recommendation was going to be. But the board's saying, we still want to work with the city council. Let's figure this out. Let's hang in there, okay? So let's meet and have a work session. So that is what happened. I will say that, you know, there's, again, what have you been doing during that time up until that mid-October point? Waiting. I mean, we were waiting. We were waiting. We were not billing our investors. How do you go to your investors and ask them to make their annual contribution when we don't have a plan? We don't even know what's going to happen to the organization. And right now, we're far apart with where we are with the city council that represents our community. So we don't have anything that we can go forward with. So we're having to be very careful with our treasury, and basically we've lived off of our savings for the last year and a half. We made certain decisions. We've retained Teresa. We did not go fill any of the other positions, but I don't think we could have. I would guess that none of us would take a position at an organization that had as many question marks over its head that the EDC had. I've had, well, why didn't you go hire a new president? Who would do that? Who would apply? Who would take the job and agree to possibly move their family to our community when there is no plan and there is no funding in place beyond the savings that we're setting on? So again, the pathway that we were going to do was to try to continue to build a trust level, work on a plan, review the bylaws, come up with a strategic plan, work on a PSA, and then move forward with selecting somebody once those components were in place. So that was the plan. I will tell you, part of it too was we haven't filled any vacancies that came up on the board. We just said, look, we don't know how this thing's going to go. Let's not bring anybody on. We don't know what we would tell them. So we had board vacancies we didn't fill. We had staffing vacancies we didn't fill because of the question marks in the future of the organization. So I think, even last Tuesday then, I will say before the council meeting, we had a discussion about the audit that we did, the financial audit for FY22 and 23. That was completed in early January. We got a clean bill of health. we thought that, again, was a very major component as we move forward, that we had a clean bill of health by a accounting forensic firm that would come in and take a look at our books and determine whether or not there were any issues there. So we had done that. What we also had done, again, we're on the cusp of thinking, okay, we've been working with city council members and the city on the bylaws. We've got this meeting coming. We've got 25 people scheduled to be there on Thursday night to begin a discussion about economic development and the development of a strategic plan. So we said, you know what? We'd been having this discussion, but we actually had a resolution that we were going to go ahead and the board was going to go ahead and make partial investments. And then we were going to use that and go out with an investor letter to begin building the case for our investors. We've told you we're working on this process. It looks like we're on the cusp. We think now is the appropriate time to ask for an investment in the organization. So that was a decision that we made last Tuesday night, or Tuesday afternoon. You know, again, I heard the discussion. We had a good board meeting. It was 2 hours long. It was a good meeting. So, again, I think in retrospect, or after this week, so Mark called me, we talked, pulled up the video, sent it out to the board members, and I, said, I need direction, call me, let's talk. Had a call with a couple of them, said, what do we want to do going forward? Again, everybody has committed a lot of time. The mayor said it at the last meeting. These are people that run very large, for the most part, large organizations. And they've put a tremendous amount of volunteer hours into trying to right this ship the last year and a half. So what I heard and what I was authorized to talk about tonight is that in light of Tuesday night's comments and what appears to be a current irreconcilable relationship between the Lee Summit EDC and the Lee Summit, Missouri City Council, and the lack of agreement by and between city council members on how to proceed, the private sector members of the board, which make up the majority of the board right now, these are the representatives of the business community serving on our board, have asked me to convey that it is our position to cease any further discussions or efforts at this time to develop a joint or collaborative measure in support of economic development in Lee Summit with the Lee Summit City Council. So, that is my update to the City Council.
Can you repeat what you said you authorized, even though I wasn't invited, even though I'm a board member? Cease any measures to?
Yeah, we're basically done with continuing to work with City Council at this point. We heard enough last Tuesday that there's enough feedback, continued acrimony and distrust that we really don't think it's productive. And so the City Council seemed to say that it wanted to look at other alternatives. They were tired of waiting on us, and we're saying, okay, we'll meet and we'll decide as an organization what we'll do going forward. But at this point, there's really no reason to continue to collaborate with the City Council on any type of agreement on how we would work together for economic development in Lee Summit.
I think, Mr. Brown, you gave a summary that I have no desire to argue with. I think a lot of it was spot on and such. I do think that to make a statement that you're authorized to cease with the City Council without having a board meeting, without having a quorum, and without having a vote is another violation of bylaws.
I'm simply here reflecting what they had said. We will meet. If we need a formal resolution to do that, we can do it after the fact. I was asked to come here and give an update and report out, and I did that, and I talked to the majority, if not all of the private sector folks who authorized me to make that case. They are exhausted and done with the continuing efforts that we don't seem to be able to ever get over the hump. And so the City Council, at least some of the members, had indicated a desire to go in a different direction, and we're indicating that we hear that and we understand that.
All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Would you mind staying for questions?
Sure.
Any questions? Councilmember Lovell?
Thank you for the recap. Sad that we had to go through what we went last Tuesday, where we got kind of one side of it and just neglected everything that had been going on in the past. And I was totally surprised, and it sounds like I shouldn't have been because there were things going on. While you had city council representation, because I do remember that joint meeting, and I remember the mayor kind of putting out what he wanted, then us having a conversation, and then a pretty good directive, and I felt like a collective agreement there that we would send you guys out to do the bylaws and some other things. And then 2 ad hoc committee members, which not sure how those were chosen or, what led to those decisions. But during that process, at any time, did you hear from the mayor or our ad hoc representatives that they were frustrated with the process going forward from that point, or there was anything going on that would lead you to believe that we would have this theatrics last Tuesday night to bring up all of this and flush it out to basically want to go in a totally different direction? Had you been given any of that input? Had the board been given any of that input in those meetings?
No, I will say this, not in those meetings. I wasn't individually. I probably visited with half of the council in the last 4 weeks. Again, we had council members in the working group. I actually sent a note to the 2 council members thanking them for their participation, and I thought a very good contribution to the discussion we had. I think, again, I got to be careful. I can't say I speak for the entire board, but I would tell you that I think the board was very happy with that process and how it came out. And it was a down payment on what we felt needed to happen so that we could continue to move forward. And then that next step would be the strategic plan, which would have city representation a part of that. And so there would be that collaboration in talking about what would we be doing here in Lee Summit and try to have a shared goals that would come out of that. So no, we stood after the meeting, after 2 hours last Tuesday, and we're like, you know what, that was a good meeting. I think we're getting there.
Yeah. Well,
So,
surprise, obviously. I may
not be a very good, may not pick up the vibe very well, then maybe I'm a little thick. But we thought it was moving along well until I saw the video on Wednesday.
Well, I'm sorry to put you guys in this position, and many of the business leaders, and it seems like, from my perspective, that not operating in good faith on our end with what we had sent you to do, and maybe what was going on behind the scenes while this was going on. So sad to hear that, but certainly understand your frustrations in the board's position. Thanks.
Mayor?
Yeah, I'll let you respond to that since
Thank you very much. Since I was one of the 2 in that meeting, I will say that all 3 of us during these bylaws meetings kept raising the question, you all did not stick to your bylaws, you did not follow your bylaws for the past several years. What makes us confident that you will do so? And those questions were met with, we'll have a lawyer in the room, and then I believe the last meeting, well, we've decided not to have a lawyer in the room. So it was not up to us there were certain things, we were just working on the bylaws. We couldn't speak for the whole council on those meetings. We didn't have the authority. We hadn't talked to all of you all. We were just reviewing the bylaws. But I think Mr. Brown and the mayor just proved that they have no desire to follow their own bylaws. They're not doing it now. And so we raised those questions, I think, probably every meeting. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Before we keep going, I've been so vocal in those meetings that I've tried to give as much input as I can. So no, I didn't foresee this happening. I didn't. So, because I think that we were making progress. Was it the progress that I wanted? Was it the direction exactly the way I wanted to go? not as far as some of the decisions, no, absolutely not. Some of the order, just numerous things that could have been done differently, but I've been there for every vote. I've been there for every discussion I possibly could, unless I was in Jeff City or sick in bed. And so before we all go, get down this path, I think the only thing that I would like to mention that I maybe differ from Mr. Brown on his summary, even though there's some we could go back and debate, is that we have been committed, I feel, I have been committed. I can only speak for myself, just like you can only speak for yourself. I have been committed to seeing this through. I don't care how long it takes. I've said that I don't know how many times. I wanted to see this through, and that's why I show up to all the meetings. That's why I make sure I'm present and voting. So with that said, I will let everyone make their comments or questions, and we'll go from there. Councilmember Felker.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate the time to speak, and thank you, Mr. Brown, for coming to visit with us this evening, taking time out to kind of go through things. I appreciate the recap, and that kind of intentional effort was something that weren't hearing here. And that is a bit frustrating. Perhaps could have been the germ or the seed of why others may have come to the opinion that, or at least what was vocalized last week, of let's consider other options, to not see or at least hear out what all has happened, and the kind of methodical effort that has to be undertaken in doing this kind of a reset. And so I appreciate that feedback. Mayor and council members Edson and Hodges, that's the kind of feedback I would have liked to have seen. I mean, there was maybe a touch point at one point. We're working on the bylaws. But the fact that a strategic plan had been discussed last Tuesday night, but it sounds like it had been discussed long before that. And so even that, just kind of bringing us up to speed, maybe even a report to us, like an email to council. Hey, Mayor, from you, like we've had 3 meetings on bylaws, and it seems like we're making this kind of progress. We're coming from the city manager. However it would have been framed, I think would have been, informative for us, because if there's those of us who may have adopted an opinion that maybe we don't, that EDC's not making progress, well, maybe that's why we didn't know. If I came to this meeting and said, well, is the EDC doing anything? Well, this just told me you all are. And clearly have a plan with steps that I cannot fathom the thought that we are demanding some kind of accelerated timeline for not only a group of business leaders who run our biggest companies in the community, but also with a process that doesn't and shouldn't be rushed. So, no, I think and Frank, I remember looking at the timeline in October, and I kind of thought, I should have said something then, because I thought it was too, this is honest to goodness, I think it was too aggressive, and I should have, for my own benefit and your all's council members, I should have said, I think this is too fast. And maybe you wanted to put something out to make us feel like you wanted to move fast, but it was probably too quick. So I get that your speed at which maybe you moved is not as fast as maybe some of us would like, but I think it's reasonable and understandable. And there are countless initiatives that we as council members go through that take months, not years, to work through in our committees, and we have a lot more staff than good Miss Evans. So I think we can acknowledge, at least I can personally acknowledge, that is where I think EDC has been. I appreciated that you indicated, Mr. Brown, that you all actually said, you know what, we're going to put some of our treasure into this. We're ready to commit. I mean, I think that speaks volumes to the group and what they're committed to, which is not a fully built-out board. I would love to see that at whatever juncture, maybe an idea of when do we want to expand the board to increase the manpower that you have to work with. I think that would be a helpful kind of contribution to what your future timeline might look like. I hope mean, I appreciate that you've indicated a sentiment from the private investors, those who are on the board. And I get that that really, I think, concurrent with what the mayor says, sure, that's not a formal action that perhaps you're authorized to take, but it's an indication. I mean, we can speak our minds. It's indication of where they stand and were there to be a meeting held, perhaps a deliberation, might end up with a different result or might end up with the same result. I hope that this body deliberates a little bit more today with the feedback we've heard, with the understanding of what they're doing, with also the thought that to say no to the EDC and we're moving on, or we don't think that you're putting your full effort in, or we don't, and I struggle with the how we know you're going to abide by your bylaws. Now, having a lawyer in the room for every meeting is not cheap. That's a consideration that I think, and maybe that's part of what you're thinking. I don't know. But frankly, there's been enough conversation about being accountable to bylaws that, you know, that I think the hope would be that you all would abide by those. And if Mayor and Mr. Dunning are there, that's our opportunity as a council to say, you know, hey, Article 2, 3, whatever, you know, that's their role to do that. Would it be good to have a lawyer there for some period, perhaps? So I know I'm not asking questions, Mayor, but
I do want to say something so you can respond to it. I agree with you. This takes a lot of time. It took us well over a year to do a strat plan with the city, and it was amazingly orchestrated. With regard to reporting to the council on a strat plan, I'm sorry, Mr. Brown, we have not moved forward on a strat plan until this meeting this Thursday, right? We haven't opened up the strat plan and actually discussed anything on there. So it's one of those things where I don't have something to report to you.
Well, but it's my understanding that it's been discussed. I mean, just the,
No,
just
not in the
fact
board
that it's-
meetings. It has not been discussed because I'm willing to open that strat plan up every single meeting. I bring it to me with all my notes. I'm ready every single meeting.
I'm not talking about the past iteration. I'm just saying that it sounds like there was a discussion about, hey, one of our next steps, which was on our October's timeline of things, was to do a strategic plan, and that there had been conversations and trying to coordinate meetings between all of these interested parties, you know, community groups. So I just think that piece of information would have been helpful to know that, it sounds like, well, tell, Mr. Brown, had it been discussed in a board meeting, that
Yes.
a strat plan was something that was in the works?
Yes,
that-
and we had a conversation about the composition of that.
And when did you all start planning for the meeting to be held about a strategic plan?
It would have been, I'd have to go back and see what board meeting was next door, early to mid-January, because the discussion was who from the city would be on that. And
I would concur with that.
Okay, and so that,
I think that's what I'm thinking is,
Yeah.
it would have been,
That was less than 4 weeks ago.
I know, but we just had a conversation last week where all of a sudden we said, well, they're not doing anything, they're not doing anything.
I didn't say
I know
that.
you didn't say that.
Okay.
But there was a sentiment in council that there was 18 months of nothing. And I think we've had this conversation that there was plenty of reason why the EDC operated at a much lower level of activity. And then we kind of have given them the chance to start taking off, coordinating lots of schedules around holidays, the first of a year, and then to work on I mean, there's a lot going on right there. So I think the timeline, what they're working on sounds reasonable. And I think it would have been helpful to know, hey, a strat plan's in the work, what's coming. We didn't talk last week about the fact, Mr. Brown, did you say last Tuesday you all talked about investing?
Yes.
Your fund, in the board
yeah,
meeting?
we actually passed a resolution as a board
And
that we
that-
would assess each other the first 4 months of this year, the membership fees. And we discussed that I'm glad I didn't send it out at this point. I've been drafting an investor letter trying to give an update to the investors of what we've been doing, a lot of what I shared here tonight. And part of that investor letter draft had us letting them know that we as a board were going to make contributions, and we were going to ask them, those that wanted to also make contributions. That was discussed last Tuesday afternoon.
We've been, let me correct, we've been talking about that one for months.
Yes.
But if there was a.
So do you see, I can't communicate something that I don't know if it's going to happen or not, and it didn't happen.
It sounded like you all said you would be, you said that you had made a
We've said this
decision
numerous times.
that they would send out, that they, the members of the board were going to take the lead on making partial pledging, or basically pledging partial dues, and then sending an like that kind of, I'm just trying to frame a little bit of this, Mayor, and is that I feel like there was pieces of this that could have helped us as a council.
Well, those dollar amounts changed pretty drastically.
I don't care where they move, but the fact that they made a commitment to a dollar amount, I think is a meaningful
They
data
didn't
point.
commit because it didn't happen, sir.
Okay. What, Mr. Brown, was there a commitment?
We passed a resolution authorizing Teresa to do that. As a matter of fact, she was going to be getting assistance this Monday, yesterday, to begin making those, based upon the resolution that was passed by the board.
I was going to submit a invoice to the.
She was
the board
going to
member
go ahead and
investors.
invoice all of the members of the board. That was going to be the start. And then I was going to be in the investor letter writing and giving them a heads up that we were looking to do the same with the other non-board member investors.
So Councilmember, this happened at 5 o'clock. We had a meeting at 6. We didn't have an EDC agenda item on the agenda, and then you brought up in council comments you wanted an update. So I apologize, I didn't get you that portion of the update, but we had been talking about that for some time. I did have to recuse myself on that one because I represent the city and I'm a board member, so I could not commit on behalf of every one of these council members. There's a lot of information. That was a very intense, good but intense 2-hour meeting.
So I appreciate all that, and there's plenty of times I don't remember everything that happens in this meeting. I think this would have been a data point that would have been helpful, Mr. Dunning, Mr. Mayor, to bring into the conversation with what we talked about last week. Because again, it shows something that was not reflected, or at least was not discussed, allowing us as a body to deliberate on what we think about the EDC. We didn't know that, yes, there was a conversation about dues being reinitiated, an investor letter being sent out, the strategic plan had been talked about in several meetings.
I'll give it to you, sir.
Okay.
It's an awful high standard, but I will try to be better with regard to something along those lines.
When we have to make these decisions, especially in the light of what was presented last week, was, we need to move on. Like, well, what
I never
basis?
said we needed to move on.
You never made a statement as to what you need to do. You allowed us to talk through it, but there were sentiment expressed from Councilmember Edson, Councilmember Shields, Councilmember DeMauro, where it was felt like, well, there seems to be something moving in this direction, and that was.
I'm conceding much of that to you. Let's
So-
try to move on to other parts
Okay,
of
I
this.
appreciate that. Thank you for giving me the time to talk through it. But something I wrote down here, and I kind of said this last week. So this is just me speaking, for myself, and as maybe an invitation to fellow council members, is why don't we fully engage as council members with members of the EDC board? Why don't we reach out, take the lead? We've talked about them not having a relationship with us. Well, we're the council members for the City of Lee Summit. Why aren't we engaging? Why aren't we reaching out to them and developing a relationship, going out for coffee, going out for lunch, saying what's going on? How's this going? Like, we're supposed to lead this city. So in my opinion, I think we have the opportunity to bring, if you will, healing to the relationship, to bury these past grievances, allow the business leaders of our community to show that they are capable of running their own companies and capable of being contributing voices on the future of what economic development looks like in our community.
Agree with all that, sir.
Thank you.
Very good points. Councilmember Pryor.
Thank you, Mayor. So I have a lot of thoughts going through my mind, but thank you for the update. I think that that's the type of update that I have been, me personally, looking for this entire time. That's the type of communication that, not just from you, I mean, from from our own city. So my question is kind of just, how did we get here? Everyone's so quick to point the finger at everyone else, but how did we get here? And if we can't identify how we got here, then how are we ever going to keep it from happening again? And with any direction we collectively choose to go, if we can't identify how we got to this, it's going to happen again. And I mean, me personally, I know just from this past week and from, well, the week leading up to last Tuesday, I can tell you that the communication factor amongst us, council, thankful for Councilmember Hodges for communicating so much to me after a meeting that happened, I guess, not last Thursday, the Thursday before. But the communication just isn't there. And if we can't communicate with each other, how we have to get past the inability to communicate with each other before we can expect a good, healthy relationship with any sort of EDC, LSEDC, or whatever direction we choose to go. And I just wish that, I just wish that that type of communication that I heard tonight would have been happening all along. I think it would have made a huge difference, not only for you guys, but just letting us know where the process is. Because there's so much I heard tonight that, and you know, I've heard several people say, well, nothing's happening. It just feels like nothing's happening. And clearly there have been things happening. So, I don't know, I think we all of us on council need to take a long, hard look at what we're doing too. And it's not your guys' fault, it's our fault too. So, and we need to have a plan on how to, I think, collectively move past this. And so, yeah, it's a lot of work to be done, but thank you.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Shields.
Mayor. So, you know, I obviously started the conversation last week about feeling like it was time to move on. And that is my sincere opinion, and that's why I brought it up. It wasn't because of anyone lobbying me behind the scenes about anything. It was because I saw a timeline in October, and I felt like it wasn't being met, and I wasn't hearing about any kind of real substantive progress. And it seemed to me that eventually you just have to say enough is enough. And so, not to make light, but it's nice that tonight I'm in sincere agreement with, it sounds like, the members of the EDC. Like, I think it's just time to move on. I don't wish ill on the EDC. I just don't want to enter into a new contract with them. And if they want to work together with their membership to be a strong organization, that's great. I actually thought Councilmember Pryor's question a moment ago, how do we keep this from happening again, is a really good one. And I feel like part of how we keep this general situation from happening again, to me, is accountability. To me, is saying that if you don't comply with a contract and you don't show substantial progress, that eventually the funding will be shut off and it won't come back. And that if there is never a time when you can say, you know what, enough is enough, we're done, there's not going to be any more funding, why would any organization ever think that they need to comply with an agreement that we have with them? Why would they ever think that they need to work with us, communicate with us, spend taxpayer money responsibly if they know that eventually we'll give in and we'll just give the money back despite no changes being made? So that's a big part of why I feel like it's time to move on, and that I agree with Councilmember Felker that timeline was aggressive, but that was what was presented to us. And if you didn't feel like that was something that you could make happen, then you shouldn't have said that you could. Same thing I would say about entering into the previous PSA. If you didn't feel like it was something that you could make happen, you shouldn't say that you could. I realized that it wasn't a formal agreement, it was a proposal, but I took it seriously. And my attitude was not, we are gung-ho on a reset. My attitude was, this has been a long and difficult process. I think it's time to seek other alternatives, but it sounds like the EDC really wants to keep working with us, and so I'm open to hearing new proposals if I can see substantial progress, and I just haven't. So That is why I brought it up. The one regret that I do have is one of communication that I think has been a point well made here, is that I should have brought that up 2 months ago. I should have brought up 2 months ago, I want to see substantial progress, what's going on, we're not hitting these deadlines. I shouldn't have waited another 2 months to say, okay, I'm done. Communication goes both ways. I wish that when you saw that you weren't hitting those dates, that you would have reached out to council and said, here is our new target. But, you know, that's done. Bygones be bygones. So in the future, I will try to be more proactive when I'm seeing issues rather than just waiting until I'm at the end of my rope. But I felt like it was time that something had to be said. And my way of communicating that deep frustration to council and to the public was to bring it up in council comments. That is how I communicated to all of you, I'm having this frustration, and I think that we need to look at moving forward. So I'm glad that it triggered a discussion. I'm glad, despite my frustration last week, I'm glad that we brought this as a formal agenda meeting topic tonight so that we could all actually have time to think it over, have time to speak our minds, have time for the EDC to consider it and come in and speak with us as well. I think that's appropriate. So I appreciate everybody's feedback, but there's not anything that I heard tonight that makes me feel differently about it being time to move forward. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Edson.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, going back to that October work session, really, that was not our idea. We were asked to have that. There were probably, I don't want to speak for other people, but I would say there are 3 or 4 of us who saw no point in having that because we were done. We were done at that point. And EDC came to us and they wanted the reset. I'm not sure they got the buy-in they needed from all of council at that point. So since October, I think it's just been about spinning everyone's wheels, because I'm not sure there was a lot they could do to fix those relationships and to fix anything about the organization. And at that meeting, several of us said, and I believe it was Councilmember Shields who said, you broke the contract. You're not following your bylaws. We said it then, we're saying it now. They're not doing anything differently other than rewriting the bylaws. That doesn't, just because you rewrite them doesn't mean you're going to follow them or follow a PSA contract, frankly. A lot of you, this isn't the first time we've canceled a PSA contract with an organization. We've done it before. We did it 3 or 4 years ago with an organization called Velocity, and it's not the end of the world. So I agree with Councilmember Shields. It's time to move on. Thank you, Mayor.
Great, thank you. Councilmember DeMoro.
Thank you, Mayor. Interesting conversations. Thank you for your presentation. Thank you for your comments. But I did want to say, and I personally, I took an inference to, or object to the inference that the feedback to the council should have come from Councilmember Edson and Councilmember Hodges. I don't feel like, they were selected on this committee, and I don't feel like that they were responsible for the information flowing to the council. I have never received a general update. I have never been able to sit down with somebody and get an update, and to infer that they were lacking in not telling the council what was going on. And the story should have come from the other side of an update, just like you gave tonight. It would have been very helpful. However, they, I don't think, should be responsible for updates to this body. And so I just wanted to say that. I'm not going to rehash what I said last week, because I have actually said that for 4 years. This all started in December of 2020, almost 4 years, a little over 3 years. And my position has not changed at all, because I saw what was happening in 2020, and it continued and continued, and the basis for my opinion or my feelings was born way back then. So I won't rehash what I said yesterday, but the communication item is a great failure. And, you know, you go weeks without any information from the other side. And it's hard to, if you don't hear it from the source, you take it with a grain of salt. I'm that way. I say, well, I want to hear it from who is actually meeting, who's doing this and that. So anyway, my 2 cents. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, thank you, sir. Councilmember Lovell.
Just some final points here, and this is just how I feel. Bottom line, this was political. There's a group of people up here that had no interest in moving forward with the EDC in the current iteration from the get-go. And yet we sat here as a body all around this table and said, hey, we want to work with you some more. Even though I'm hearing up here now that they had no interest in that. And then we sent you out there to do the work, and we just decided to just throw it all away last Tuesday in some random council comment session without having all the facts and everything that was there. And there's a handful of people up here that weren't willing to throw away 40 years of an organization, turn our backs on the biggest employers in this city that donated their time and their energy to right this ship, which by all accounts, we were riding it. And it's because they had their mind made up. And I'm sorry that we did that to you. I'm sorry that we did that to you, Teresa. I'm sorry we did that to our board members and the other business leaders up there. Because somehow up here, we think we know better, that the public sector knows better how to run this organization than the private sector of business leaders. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry we put you through it, because we had every opportunity that night we sat there. They had the votes. They could have just shut it down right there, and we didn't. We said, go out and do some more work. And then here we are. Last night, out of nowhere, council comments, it just goes all over the place. And it sounds like maybe it had been brewing. So I apologize to you, and I apologize to you guys. But thank you for your time, and thanks for coming here and presenting. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Lopez.
Thanks, Mayor. Mr. Brown, thank you for the information. I don't want to be redundant. Communication, this recap you're doing tonight, I wish we would have had it on a monthly basis. And I would agree with some of the comments that even though we had council representation in this group for the reset, I don't think it was their responsibility to give us this update. I think had we had yourself as the chair, as a board chair, or whomever from the board, I think that would be more helpful. With that being said, again, not to rehash and go back, well, I want Councilmember Lovell to hear this because I want to know who's playing politics. But with that being said, yes, I was one of the council people that was adamant, along with the comments that have been made about terminating the PSA and moving on to a different organization. I was one of the strongest advocates of that. That being said, when we did have the joint session, my perspective changed a little bit. And I got questioned and critiqued quite a bit from some of my council members up here because they felt that I had a change of heart and changed my opinion. Maybe some people saw that as wishy-washy. But as far as believing in what the EDC was and what it stood for, I've said it before publicly, in previous corporate positions that I've had, I've been an investor for many years of the EDC, strong advocate of the EDC, but it was broke. It was broke, and that's why we defunded and terminated the PSA. We all know that. I don't want to rehash that. Also, it's unfortunate, I was out of town. I had a commitment. I wasn't here last week, so I missed the exciting dialogue last week. But I did watch the tape. I didn't know this conversation was going to be had last week. So whatever conspiracy or politics is being played, such as Councilmember Shields, I had no knowledge of any of this going on behind the scenes as it's being alleged. And I want to make that clear. That ship sunk 5.5 years ago when I, as a new council person, joined this body. We don't do that around here. I want to make that clear publicly. Politics? Who's playing politics? That's what I want to know. With that being said, again, I appreciated your recap and kind of explaining about the reset, and the mayor acknowledged that majority of your information was very factual and on point. I was still willing, even before you made your last statement about the board's wishes, I was still willing to continue to work with the EDC. But it's caused a lot of havoc and dissension up here, obviously. But with your board's wishes, that they really are, if you're really representing your board, then that speaks for itself. So, huge advocate of EDC and the work that it's done in the past. And if we can't find a path forward together, based on what you said tonight, then maybe it's time to go back to the drawing board and do something different. I would hope that whatever, we have these strategic plan options and different ideas that have been thrown out there as far as future, what it could look like. I would hope there's still something there that we can work together on if we're going to scratch this process. So I would hope that door is still open. If we're doing totally blowing this up and starting new, I think that's healthy discussion for this community, not politics. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, thank you. We will go back around, but I'm going to make a few comments first before we do, since I haven't got to say a couple things. But first, I want to make sure, Councilmember Hodges, you haven't had a chance. Did you want to say anything right now, or do you want to wait? Okay. So let me tell you how I feel, okay? Because we've been in those meetings, and they have been at times intense, because we're passionate, and we're supposed to be finding what we have in common, and we seem to just constantly be running into the issues that we disagree upon or don't agree upon, at least a direction. And so I'm gonna push back a little bit on this, and this is how I really feel. I have been working hard to save this organization and put it, on the right tracks. And if I'm passionate, it's not because I'm trying to get rid of it. It's because I'm trying to get us to, like I said in the last meeting, you guys want a report? Here's a report. I said it's $1 million budget. It's $1 million budget to have a really, really good, if not great, EDC. And we are half that. Half that from the city, half that from the investors. How in the world are we going to do $1 million budget based on what we're doing right now and based on the strat plan that we didn't have before? So I have given lots of feedback in these meetings, and I have tried to bring perspective, and I have tried to advocate for major decisions as far as to change the direction of the ship. And I am surprised, and I got to be honest, I don't, as much as I want change, because I do consider myself a change agent, as much as I want it, this is not how I wanted it to go. I want change in a positive direction, and I think that you all have put us, because I'm on the board, I'm with you, we're a team actually. We have put ourselves in a situation where too few people are carrying the burden. So we haven't filled the members, we haven't brought enough people in the room, we haven't, like you're trying to do this Thursday, it's too much of a burden for the people that are in that room, and we need different people with different perspectives in there, questioning and challenging us, me included. I don't care if it's the whole council. I don't care if it's, you had a lot of people come into this meeting this coming week. I don't know who all they were. I can't even remember. I'd have to go back to the email list. I don't know if it's the right people, Mr. Brown. But all I'm saying is, I have been trying to change the EDC for the better, and I have not been trying to get you guys to walk away, if that's implied. I do think that they are the phenomenal. The reason I say that is because the very people that are in the room and the very people we need to go back to start over, and that's a bad feeling. So I think that there should be more people in the room. There should have been more people in the room. If the EDC board's done, I totally understand. I can assure you this, Mr. Brown, I will put together a plan. With their help, it will have timelines that I will drive like crazy to meet, and I've got a couple of years to get this done. So that's where I'm at. Councilmember Felker.
Thank you, Mayor, and I appreciate the dialogue we're having as a council. Sometimes it's good to disagree and have different opinions and work through things. That's, I think, what we're kind of sent here to do. I don't agree with the sentiment that, let me say something. Yes, would it have been helpful, Mr. Brown, to have had you present something to us a month ago? To volunteer to do that. I think that would have been perhaps a good thing. Would it have also been helpful to have extended an invitation to you on behalf of the mayor and the city manager to bring you here to do that? That would have been good. And I don't think that we can say that members of council who serve on a committee don't have some kind of obligation to us as a body. Like, I just disagree with that. I think when we have, we'll do it later tonight. We'll give committee reports. And chairs sit here and we say what's coming up or what we did. We report to each other. We're on liaisons on various boards. And whether we fulfill those liaison responsibilities or not, to whatever degree we do, we have a responsibility to bring that information back to council. So I don't think we can just put it back on you, Mr. Brown. Yes, I would have liked you to come back and say, hey, I'd like to give a report to council. But we have just as much of a responsibility to come back to you. If my wife and I have a problem, if I say it's her problem, sorry, it's not going to be a good night, good week, good month if I take that perspective. So council members, it is on us to do that for each other and for our community. So I just can't be more committed to that idea that is something that we as a body should be doing for each other. I think we should let go of the past. I think when we reflect sincerely upon what the problems were and who may have been the source of the problems, those have changed. And Mr. Brown has said more than once that acknowledging that. We have members of the board here who are still here, even though this is being said, frankly, about them and other members of the board. They're here, willing to be a part of this. Have spent the time and their efforts to have the conversation. So I think that being rooted in the past is just not a productive way for us to function as a council. I acknowledge there are problems, and I think we took the corrective action. If I had a wound in my leg, then it needed to be debrided. If anyone knows what that means, it means you clear out got a nurse over here. It means you clear out all the scabs and you clean it off and you let it grow again. And you do it again, and it's painful. And we've done that, and we're still kind of doing it. So maybe this is part of what we're doing right now. So maybe we don't end up going forward with you. I don't know what the sentiment, Mr. Brown, of council or mayor, what the overall sentiment. I appreciate that. I'm hearing that you want this to be a great success, and I think the fact that not everyone's agreed with your viewpoints in the board and that there's been differences of opinion is frankly a good thing, because our best decisions are going to be born out of disagreement. And I believe that wholeheartedly. Coming together around something that can be better than it was before. So, again, I hope that there's a change in our sentiment and that there is a desire to say, you know what, we'll put our own effort in to meet a board member. Take that first step. Have a personal, in-person meeting with a board member. Not Mr. Brown. Yes, we could do it with you. But someone else, just to get their perspective. Meet with an investor. What's your take on the EDC? How could I, as a council member, be a part of that? I think that's the engagement that we need to be doing. I hope that if that's not the case, if that doesn't happen, I certainly will do my part personally to engage with members of the EDC board and the investors. I hope that you all create something wonderful. that you blaze a trail for this community to get behind and for this council to get behind in terms of the future of economic development. I want to make a comment about this comment about politics and what I think it's born of. And Mr. Dunning, I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, but if you could share with us as a body what I understand was a meeting that was held that I think is part of what is underlying this sentiment that I don't think was necessarily an attempt at politics. I'll just state this very clearly. But I think airing this would be helpful for us as a body to get through so that we understand what was in that meeting, what was proper about it, because I've communicated that to you that I think it was. And I think what was perhaps implicated or implied maybe incorrectly from that meeting. So I didn't prepare you for this. I didn't ask you to do this, but do you mind speaking to that?
Sure. So to be very clear, there was a meeting that was held, I think it was February 1st, if memory serves me right. And that meeting entailed the mayor, myself, Mr. Elam, and the two council members that are on the bylaw task force, so Councilmember Edson and Councilmember Hodges. And that meeting took place to talk about the EDC, to talk about the efforts that the bylaws committee had put forth, and also just to brainstorm. Where are we at? Where are we headed? And you heard me speak last week about a plan forward. And there, to my knowledge, there is no clear plan forward that's been agreed to by the EDC Board of Directors and by the mayor and the council. So we've had all these proposals thrown back and forth, but to my knowledge, there has never been agreement on that plan forward. And at that meeting, that was one of my, something that was churning in my gut. And I've had this discussion at the EDC board meeting, and I shared it at that meeting that was held on February 1st. And that is that the EDC is taking this next step. The bylaw committee has done their work. The EDC is getting ready to take this next step to go into this strategic planning session. And nowhere is there, that I'm aware of, is there agreement on that next step. And what I feared was that the EDC would expend additional resources on another initiative that may not have led to anything, any positive result. And so from my perspective, the conclusion of that meeting was some brainstorming, and that we needed to have a council discussion, much like we're having now, so that it is clearer as to whether or not that step that the EDC may take towards strategic planning would be a step in the right direction. I think to me, personally, I think all that was agreed to was, let's do some bylaw work. And there wasn't full knowledge by this body that the best, or not the best practices, the strategic planning efforts would be going forward. There wasn't full knowledge from the EDC Board of Director perspective that would be a good step accepted by this body, would be a next step. So to me, that was a result of that meeting. Now, was there discussions about how can we enhance the EDC's efforts in that meeting on February 1st? There was. And there was discussion about if there was a resource at the city, how might that work with the EDC and with the DMO coming on and with the chamber and these 4 common areas that successful EDOs have and these 8 characteristics that we need. How can we bring all of that together? So there was that discussion, brainstorming in that, and I shared with that group at that meeting that at one point in time, we had a resource, 2 resources actually, here at the city. One was focused on economic development and one on redevelopment.
And when you say, you use the term resources, people.
People.
2 people.
Correct.
Okay.
And so we talked about that and what might that look like. So that was a discussion that was brainstorming, saying how can we make this go further, right? So that was the end result of that meeting, in my opinion, was to have a dialogue here at the council level before the EDC took the next steps to go into strategic planning and everything that goes into that to make sure we're synced up. So from my perspective, now, having said that, the discussion at council comments last week was a little deeper than, it caught me off guard, right? I thought there was going to be discussion that, hey, we need to talk about EDC before we get too further, let's all get synced up. I think we're syncing up now, or at least figuring out where we're at now. It's just been a little rough road to get there. So from my perspective, I think that part of our challenge is we don't have a clear path forward. What are the steps, I'll call them building blocks, that need to occur, and in what order to get to a better spot? We're missing that, and we're also, I will be transparent, I talked to Bill just like, as he said. And I told him, I said, at the highest level, there's a decision point to be made prior to even planning. Is there a desire by the EDC to want a relationship and a PSA with the city? That's the first question before we start talking about a plan. So those are the two things that I think have been a challenge for everyone involved that's created a lot of frustration. But to be transparent, yes, that meeting occurred. I felt strongly we needed council dialogue, this interaction, so that there was awareness of where the EDC was headed, because that could have been time wasted and without this discussion, right, to know whether that would be a good next step.
So
I only have one little thing to add, and that is I have been advocating behind the scenes with city staff nearly my entire time in office for a community liaison. This is not a new idea that I've come up with. I think that it would be important because when we talk about relationships with the board members of the EDC, if we don't have one, then we need someone that help us. And we lean on Mark Dunning and Ryan Elam to be those liaisons. But I mean, Mr. Dunning is way too busy for that at this point.
Thank you for bringing that up. That was one of the things I shared with both the council members is we do not have a person on city staff that is 100% focused on this environment. Economic development, community partners, their work, right? I don't have that capacity. Ryan Elam doesn't have that capacity. We don't. And at that time where we had the two people, that was their main focus, working with community partners, working in those environments, not supervising, overseeing services and everything else that we do here at the city. That was their focus. Now, at that time, there was, like I said, one focused on new development and a person focused on redevelopment activities.
But to be very clear, and this may be both a question for both Mayor, you and Mr. Dunning, that conversation was not entertaining the idea of taking economic development in-house. Is that a correct analysis?
I would agree with that, right? Actually, there was discussions about bringing certain functions in-house, and I said, I believe. So now you're asking, this is Mark Dunning's opinion, just to help with the conversation. So I shared in that meeting that there are functions that a successful EDO performs that I don't feel we as city employees would do well. From an ethics perspective, from just an overall perspective. And two of those are business attraction. It's not right for us as city employees to reach out to business A and not be fair to other businesses that perform those same services in that sector. So that's one, you're picking and choosing winners. I would not do that if you were asked me to do that. It doesn't feel right. The other is business retention. In the sense of, would we have city employees going out and calling on these businesses? It'd be similar to snow plowing is, I think, the way I think about this. Well, whose door gets knocked on first, and why haven't you gotten to me yet? And we got to be fair to all, right? So those are two key aspects that I think that, if we were to bring an EDO, attempt to bring an EDO in-house, I think we'd need outside resources to help us prop up all those core functions that a successful EDO provides.
So I get to answer that too, because I have stated many times publicly that the same thing. There are things we cannot do if we take it in-house. There's a lot of pressure on us as council members, just like the EDC feels pressure. People come to us and say, what are you doing about economic development? They say that to us. And they say, what are we doing as far as business attraction or the functions of the EDC? Yes, we fund the EDC. So are they asking us, what are we doing, as in why aren't we funding? Or whether they're asking us, what are we doing? Okay? And so maybe there are some things that we can do. If we had a community liaison right now, even with all the struggles that we're having with the EDC, we would have a conduit, like you say, or someone that's communicating, someone that can keep up with this rather than me. So that was my thought. I will not say, I will say enhance, that's fine, but no offense, Mr. Brown, but to compensate for the EDC at this point. Because, you know, people are criticizing us because we don't have a functioning EDC. And you could say they're criticizing the EDC, they're criticizing us, we're all in this together. They're criticizing us because we haven't funded it, because we haven't put together a plan, because we haven't worked together. So looking for solutions is what I was doing with that. Go ahead, Councilmember Felker.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate the response, Mr. Dunning. Appreciate the frank dialogue. And I think part of just kind of responding to this politics question, I mean, we are a political body. Number one, we are political, okay? Can we talk to each other outside of this meeting and share opinions and try to engage each other perhaps in pursuit of a cause? We can. Obviously, there's quorum rules, sunshine stuff, again, all that, and I think we're all aware of that. I think just in light of this conversation, what I think occurred, and I'm just kind of being critical of us as a body, is like I think something happened and then it kind of blossomed into something that led some of us to think something was afoot. And that's, I think, where this sentiment arose. I think it would have been communication is what we've been talking about today, like in every direction. I think to the extent if the topic of that meeting could have been brought to this body, even, you know, hey, brief email to council or just a call, boy, wouldn't that have gone a long way to helping us frame last week's discussion and whatever would be happening now, to give us, like, that, Mayor, you had an idea of a community liaison. Well, I'm not necessarily opposed to that. I think at some point we have a very functioning private EDC, and we have some component of our infrastructure here that interfaces with them on behalf of the city management and council. That sounds great. I just think we could have perhaps avoided some of the consternation had this conversation been elevated in a different way and perhaps before council comment, because there was conversation there were discussions about, well, should we do something different with EDC? And when you tie all that together, I think it led and leads me, at least being one of those who was not part of that, and I appreciate, because it was a very purposeful body for that meeting to have that conversation. It just led to a feeling of, well, something's being done, and I don't even have an update of where we're at on this whole process. So I would love to find a way. I'll go back to that statement I said at the end. I'd love to find a way to move forward. I hope that the EDC moves forward in the ways that you all see fit as a deliberate body yourselves to arrive at a direction that commits our community to what, again, what economic development could be and should be. And I mean, I'm ready as a council member to continue conversations and continue, doing whatever I can to help move this forward. So, thank you, Mayor.
I think we should be over communicating. I agree with all of that. I mean, it's very hard. It's very difficult to judge when you're, or realize when you're not communicating something that maybe you should, or there's also, it gets really touchy because if I have a conversation with you, I consider that confidential. That's not something that I share with another council member. If I have a conversation with you and Mayor Pro Tem Lopez at the same time, that's still a confidential information. It is not a quorum. So it's very tough. It's very tough. But I acknowledge and absolutely agree, more communication would be solving these problems. Absolutely. Councilmember Pryor.
Thank you, Mayor. So I've actually already gotten a chance to speak, and I see Councilmember Hodges is on here.
Yeah.
So I was going to give her, but I just do have a question really quick, though. As far as, and I was hoping maybe, because I know she was in the meeting, and maybe she could address it a little bit. I'm still confused as to how at the end of that meeting on Thursday, how, and I know it's going to happen with any meeting. People hear different parts of every meeting, but I spoke with 2 council members that were in the meeting, and I feel like maybe the takeaway from that meeting that happened on that day was different with everyone. And so I'm still confused kind of on where that is. And yeah, so anyway, I wanted to skip my turn to talk and then let her talk, because she hasn't had a chance yet. So,
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Hodges.
Thank you. First off, I wanted to clear something up, or something that I was confused about last Tuesday. I know Councilmember Felco just addressed this again about asking about, what were we talking about in the meeting, what was addressed, and I think Councilmember Pryor did too on last Tuesday, and I was sitting here a little bit confused and a little bit disappointed as well, because if you rewatch it, they're literally asking point blank questions that were denied, and I wasn't sure why. It's as simple as just saying, yes, we had a meeting. This is going back to Tuesday. We had a meeting. I don't think there's anything to hide about that. We were both on the ad hoc committee. We discussed issues about, okay, let's, drawing out what entities get what money from the city, what that looks like, how many employees do they have, all of that kind of stuff, and just breaking things down. And then towards the end, it was brought up that an idea was brought up about, I took it, and again, this is me speaking for myself, that it was discussing bringing it in-house. And this wasn't, I didn't take it that it was, this is what we were gonna do. Again, it was a discussion or an idea. It was an idea that was brought up, and it was discussed. In the meeting, it was also said, this needs to be taken to full council. And so that was not something that never came up. So I guess I was just very confused from last Tuesday. I walked away thinking, I feel like I'm in the twilight zone. I was like, they denied a meeting, but I was in that meeting, so I don't know what was going on. So I was very disappointed in those answers, because it's just as simple as just saying, yeah, here's what happened. There's nothing to hide. I mean, we don't have anything to hide. I was in that meeting. There's nothing to hide. So I agree wholeheartedly that communication is key. I think we're all learning that tonight, that we all lack good communication with multiple entities, between ourselves, between even just mayor and ourselves and the mayor, every direction it goes. And I will be the first to admit that I'm one of those, and I have not been great at communication. Something that I feel like I'm realizing, which I'm thankful for dialogue like this. Again, it's okay that we don't all agree. I agree that it's healthy, nobody wants a council that just is yes sir, yes ma'am, and doesn't have diverse opinions and ideas to offer. But I will say, I feel like there's been a lot of perspective change for me, being in the ad hoc committee, seeing, and again, this goes back to communication. I hadn't really, I didn't have a relationship with anybody on LSCDC. And that's not necessarily pointing fingers. Yes, they could have reached out to me, but the phone works both ways. I think that's pretty common sense. So that was a realization for me, and I think that also Councilmember Felker pointing that out just has made it hit a little bit harder, that, yes, I could have done that as well, and I failed. So I'm admitting that. I'm guilty in that perspective as well. So, and I apologize for that. That doesn't mean that it just makes everything better, that we're saying we should have communicated, that makes everything better. No, I mean, we know things happened in the past. And I feel like Councilman Pryor and I, it was a privilege to get to meet with you and discuss things. I feel like we had a good conversation. You were very honest with us. And it was just nice, again, to hear another perspective. And I would love to hear other perspectives as well. Because it just opens your eyes to more ideas and things that you hadn't heard before. And I think that was really great. I will say, I'm going to be very blunt with this, because I feel like you've heard it multiple times. And I think I even asked you about it when we met. Multiple people up here have mentioned that they have a problem with you being in your position. And I know you know that, because that has been voiced. Would you just clear up what that looks like? Tell us what that, I mean, I know that you're coming to us saying that you're done, but that's been a concern for a lot of people, saying, well, we wish he wasn't on there, blah, blah, blah. I would love to hear your perspective. What would that have looked like for you? Because I don't think we've all heard that. We keep saying it behind the scenes, and then you hear what, people have said, but I think it just needs to be out there. What does that look like? What does, and I've also heard a lot of people say, lack of leadership, and that's not specific to you, just in general with LSCDC, but why are we not looking at restructuring the board like we talked about? That's, a few of us have discussed that's been a little bit out of order. We'd have loved to have seen that first maybe, but I would love to hear your perspective on just kind of those things.
Sure. I think a couple of things. I think one, the board's view of a restructuring of the board is, where does this end up at? So if we're not going to be in conjunction with the city of Lee Summit moving forward, and we have a different mission or choose to go down a different path, I think that would become a discussion about the board makeup. I mean, we've reached out and we're adding a number of community stakeholders to that group. I'm not saying we would retreat from that, but I think part of this was, okay, let's see how this goes before we reconstitute the board. And so that was, again, kind of the steps here was, let's get buy-in with the bylaws, let's get buy-in with the strategic plan, let's have a discussion about the PSA. If we're not going to have a PSA, I do think that would affect what the group is ready to do relative to the board makeup. Now, that's me. I would argue that we ought to look at that differently if we can't reach an accommodation with the city that we're doing economic development in tandem. Relative to me personally, I think what I told you and Councilwoman Pryor was there could be a lot of reasons people have a problem with me. I don't know. It might be, the color of my hair. It might be my politics. It might be my business avocation. It could be a lot of different reasons. I'm not totally sure because I'll tell you the truth. Nobody's ever walked up to me and said, I have a problem with you and here's why. So I'm open to that discussion. Having said that, I think vis-a-vis the EDC, what all of the board members and myself included have said, we are going to be part of the process. We don't have to be at the end of the line. And so I have been very clear that I was not resigning from the board until we were clear how this process was going to end. And if we couldn't reach accommodation with the city, then that's a very different discussion. I don't have to be a part of the final solution, but to me, the final solution is that we've agreed on a lot of things. We do have a strategic plan put together, and we do have a PSA and a funding agreement in place. So I don't intend to leave the board till that's over with unless the board votes me off, which I, again, have asked them if there is a desire by the board members to vote me off of the board, they're free to make that motion and vote on it, and I understand that. It's not my position that I hang on to. I do think, and you and I and Councilwoman Pryor talked a little bit about that, if we're looking at EDC and we're talking about economic development, I do think you want a lot of different perspectives and experience around the table when you're doing that. I would put forward my resume and the work that I've done on community development and economic development, both on the public side of things as a presidential appointee, what I'm doing right now with Paragon Star, what I had as a consulting practice before that, the work that I did on the rebuild of the Gulf Coast, when I worked at Fannie Mae, a lot of different experiences that are there. I think that's helpful to the discussion, but again, if there's a desire that I'm not, the board can take that action or not. And so I'm not walking away from the EDC. I served on there for 5 years. on that executive committee. I believe in the organization, and I'm not going to let some of the issues that come up get in the way of us moving that organization forward. So that's really it. I don't have to be a part of the final solution, but until we have a pathway and an agreement in place, I don't plan on leaving.
Thank you for answering that.
Sure.
That's all I have for now.
Thank you. Councilmember Edson?
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to respond to Councilmember Pryor, her earlier comments. Probably the reason you got different responses was because it was a brainstorming session. So each of us took different thoughts away from that meeting. And I think the city manager did an excellent job summarizing that meeting. But there was no end result. There was no decision other than we got to figure out how to get council to talk about the EDC and moving forward. So I imagine that's why you got different things, because each of us took different parts away just because it was brainstorming, and we took the parts we liked. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Pryor?
Thank you, Mayor. And I understand that. I really wish that all of us would have been a part of that, and I really wish that it would have maybe happened differently. We all have different perspectives on what we would like to see and what we would like to see going forward. And I think that, something as simple as meeting with 2 council members at a time, with the mayor and maybe the city manager, just getting everyone's perspective. I think that would have gone a long way. And again, that goes back to the communication factor. But I guess my big question is, I always want to think like, okay, well, what's next? Obviously, this happened tonight. What's next? And I know there's got to be a lot of discussions and everything else, but what's next? Are we still allowed to be a part of the strategic plan like initially? I know a couple council members were invited, or are we where do we go from here? What does that look like to you anyway?
So we're canceling Thursday night's meeting. So based upon where it looked like we were with the city, didn't see a real reason to go on with that. And so that meeting is canceled. Can it be resurrected? Can we move forward? I don't know. I do think the community should have an economic development strategic plan. And a variety of perspectives feeding into that, whether it's business retention, attraction, workforce development, community development. I mean, there's a lot of pieces, and it needs a lot of hands rowing that boat in order to move it forward. So, I mean, there's a lot that could be done, and we probably wouldn't have put forward the strategic plan discussion if we didn't believe that that was the best way to get people at a table and have a shared vision and a buy-in of that shared vision by those various parties. I mean, I don't know that it's the right group. There may be people left out of it, but I mean, we did think with our educational partners and with the other PSAs, I guess the DMO is also invited in there. So the idea was, let's start with that and see where we go. Somebody may raise their hand at that meeting and say, how come we don't have so-and-so here? And we're like, okay. I mean, there was no effort to exclude. It was really kind of, let's get our arms around this. This is the folks that are identified in the existing strategic plan as having a role. So let's start there and see where we go. So I think that's possible. I mean, I'm not exactly sure the next step of the EDC. I mean, that's a whole nother meeting with the board and a discussion about what goes forward. But I simply solicited responses from our private sector folks who are the majority, saying, here's where we are, here's what I'm looking to say. Do you agree with this, disagree? Call me, shoot me a text, tell me what else I should offer, where I'm wrong. So that's just kind of where we are. A couple of discussions have been, what do we do next? And I think part of it was, let's just rest for a little bit and let the city work through this, frankly. I think our view would be the city needs to have a discussion and figure out amongst them what they want to do, and we can go from there. There is no next step. that's been identified in any discussions that we've had with anybody. And again, that's not been a formal board meeting. But I was coming here tonight and I said, I'm to give a report. What do you want to, what is that report? And we're done working on this right now.
Okay, thank you. And then, I guess, we'll all be included going forward in the process that the city chooses to do? Is that my understanding, or?
You're looking at me.
I
Yes.
am. Okay.
Yes, it'll be interesting. I've put proposals out there before that didn't get received. I felt that funding was important to be done before the end of the year, so that they could build the investors of the EDC, but that didn't go anywhere. And then you heard tonight, I mean, we're still at that same spot. There is no resolution with regard to that proposal that I had. There's no response to it, other than we've been really busy on the board. But as far as if the EDC is quitting, the board members are quitting and folding up tent, I'll repeat what I said to Mr. Brown earlier. We will put together a plan and we will execute it, because that's one thing I know this city can do, this city council.
And then I guess my next question is that, is it too late? Is it still possible to have a
And just so you
joint-
know, I personally, Bill Baird, the mayor, would personally seek to make it a standalone or outside of City Hall. That would be my first preference, absolutely. That doesn't mean we're going to get there, because it's going to take a bunch of money and it's going to take a bunch of investment from the stakeholders in this community. So, that doesn't mean that's the direction, Councilmember Pryor. It means that we have to figure all this out, and it's pretty complicated if the best CEOs in our community haven't figured it out with us yet.
Okay, so going forward, can we do another joint meeting? Is that something that we can, since we've clearly established that there's been a strong lack of communication on all of us, can we do another joint meeting? I mean, there has to be a solution I don't know. I just feel like I don't want to just see it just end like this. So there has to be a solution. There has to be,
I just am, I know that there's always been the potential that the EDC board could fold up and say, we're done, we're tired of dealing with this. Do you know how many times I thought about turning my resignation letter in? Yes. In fact, I wrote it a couple times. So I get it, but I didn't. So if they want to try to figure something out, I'm sure I'll be ready. But I think I need time. Just like Mr. Brown said, they need time. I need time too, because honestly, a lot's happened in the last week. A lot of people are saying things, and we all need to, take a deep breath and, yes, put past, bygones be bygones. I'm trying to move forward, and if it comes across as having a personal issue, it's because I'm not being successful. This is a failure on my watch, so I'm not real happy right now. That's the way I see it, but I also will tell you, I'm not going to waste everybody's time and in these meetings anymore if we're going to continue like this. And so the idea of getting together again, I don't know. I got to think about that. I really do, because I've been going to these meetings every month, and then I'm got council members that are upset because I'm not giving them a blow-by-blow report. So it's really a challenge here. I'm willing to look at all options. I really am. Councilmember Pryor.
thank you very much.
Yeah, let's take a break, and then let me try to come up with something. And I'm sure we got some other smart people on city staff that can help us, and all of you. Think about what it is you really want to see, because Everyone's ready to move forward. Councilmember Felker.
Thank you, Mayor. So just comments on where we're at. We as a body, obviously, perhaps have our best energy when we're all behind something and we're 100% supportive of it. But we don't always make decisions that way, and I would propose that we have a vote tonight. I would make a motion that we, as a council, vote on whether we are going to continue and whether we will, even if the vote is divided, if we, as a body, say we will continue to work with the EDC as they continue to work through their own strategic plan, then our staff is authorized to engage its best efforts to do that.
Just to be clear, I kind of like it only because someone tried to say that that the council had given clear direction, which is not the case. We've not given clear direction.
That's why I'm bringing this up. I feel
But
like
let's
we
be
need to-
clear that I don't think there's any consensus up here to write a check to the EDC.
Oh, no, Mayor, I'm not talking about any money.
All right, but I'm
not
just
talking
saying
about
that
any money.
that's a whole nother ballgame.
Sure. What I am saying is there has been kind of mixed sentiment here, and we as council members operate by legislating, voting. We may have opinions that enter into the record, or I don't, but this is where we make our statement.
Well, I'll make a statement. I was willing to move forward with the EDC with the reconstitution of the board, and I would have even considered interim funding to get them to where they need to be so we could do a total reset.
I never
Total
heard
reset.
about interim funding, so that's the first time.
No,
I've
but
heard
I would
that.
have been willing to, and I was willing to move forward with the reconstitution of the board. But that's on the back burner for the EDC.
Okay. I would make a motion, Mayor, that we as a council vote on whether we will continue engaging with the EDC board with the intent that they might not only reconstitute bylaws, but move forward with strategic plan and the other elements that we've discussed today.
Has to be time-bound, sir.
Sorry?
Has to be time-bound, something like this. You can't say that we're time-bound, that we're doing this in perpetuity, because it feels like that. I mean, it's truly felt like this council's gonna have to get more involved. Everybody's wanting to point fingers at me tonight, but the fact is, this council needs to get more involved if that's the type of motion you're gonna put on the floor, should it pass.
Absolutely.
And I'm telling you that it's not easy. You all better be ready to buckle up and be ready to show up to meetings like
Do it.
crazy.
Let's do it.
Mayor,
Yeah.
point of order.
Yes.
Mr. Head, do our rules allow for motions to be made during council comments?
An EDC presentation.
I don't
Oh,
believe
sorry.
there's anything in any of the rules that would prevent it. I think in this instance, you are expressing a desire of council on an administrative action. You're not proposing a law. You're not proposing to spend money. You're giving staff direction and you're giving council direction, maybe to an extent to the mayor. I think that would be allowable.
Okay, we've been talking so long, I thought we were in council comments, I apologize. I bet the guys from Jim's Toe is really glad he came tonight.
Listen, I'm not trying to be funny. I would love it if you all would vote to put a timeline on this so I know when the end is. Because, no, on working with the EDC, because I have been working with the EDC, I have been putting more time than my wife would ever want me to put in to EDC, okay? So therefore, give me a deadline, make it reasonable, and then when that deadline's over, if we haven't made the progress that we need, then we pull the trigger the way a couple of council members said they're ready to pull the trigger tonight and be done too. I don't know. It seems really weird. The board quit and then half my council wants to quit. And yet, I got one person that's saying, let's have a vote. So I'm willing to discuss the vote. What's your motion, Councilmember Felker?
Well, I'll do my best. I move that we as city council employ our resources, meaning city staff, to continue engaging.
You gotta stick to council. Does he have to stick to council? No?
And the council can give direction to staff as well.
All right, go ahead, sir, sorry.
Yep, it's okay, to engage city staff to continue engaging with the EDC board as they reconstitute themselves and their strategic plan. That's my motion.
I need a time date.
Oh, you wanted a time, well.
Yes,
okay.
this can't go on for 2 years. I want an EDC, a great EDC underway by the time, I mean, I don't know if I'm supposed to say things like that, by the time I'm out of here, so that's gonna mean
Maybe I
we
make a
have to
motion.
have this done within, 4 to 6 months.
Yep. So maybe I make a motion, someone can second it, someone else can come up with a timeline. I mean, I think you've just given
All right,
an
all right.
idea.
All right. Let me start, let me go around and get some
Right.
opinions.
You want me to repeat the motion?
Did you write it down, Mr. Head?
Good luck.
I'm hoping the clerk got the whole, the whole thing.
Ms. Fowler or Curry, did you write that down?
I did not get it verbatim.
All right, go for it again, Mr.
I'll try.
Councilmember Felker.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that city council direct city staff to continue engaging with the EDC in its effort to reconstitute economic development in Lee Summit.
I think you have to reference EDC in there somewhere, LSEDC.
The EDC board, yes, wherever I said EDC, the LSEDC board, Lee Summit Economic Development Council Board.
Okay, I'm going to tell you all, you can second it, but somebody has to amend it with a time bound before I would even consider voting for this. But I would consider voting for it if it was time bound. So somebody want to second this? I don't have a second. All right, we have a motion to provide direction to city staff and to the city, period, that we are going to continue working with the EDC, LSEDC to do a reset, reconstitute the board.
Can we
I
have
put the re-
discussion on the motion? Sorry.
Yeah, I have a motion by Councilmember Felker, a second by Councilmember Pryor. Discussion. Okay, so I have a list here, but Councilmember Shields, I need to, you're gonna have to give me an indication as to what, I can go in order, you're gonna have to give me some grace here, because there's already an order. I'm gonna go with Councilmember Shields first.
Thank you. So I oppose this motion. If it goes to a vote, I'll vote against it. After a very long update about what they've been doing, the representative of the EDC board said they do not want to work with us anymore. We already terminated their PSA a long time ago. We've been doing extensive focus groups and studies and community engagement trying to figure out a path forward. They come to us again, say they really want to keep working with us. We say, okay. And then, time passes. We bring up discussion about, hey, maybe it's time to move on. And then they come tonight and they say they don't want to work with us anymore. So at the end of the day, what this is about is the LSEDC asking us for $250,000 a year, give or take. And I am not going to beg someone to come to the table with me so that I can give them $250,000 a year. I will not do it. This is not the route that I want to take. That's the nicest way that I can put it. So, no, I would not be in support of this motion, nor would I be in support of amending it. If we were to put a timeline on it, I would have that timeline expiring on December 15th when we were supposed to have the amended bylaws. Thank you.
Thank you. Who would like to go next? Edson.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with Councilmember Shields. I see no reason for us to have a motion to continue to work with the EDC when the EDC has already said they have no desire to work with us. So there's just no reason for this. So I'm voting no.
Who'd like to go next?
I'll go, Mayor.
Mayor Pro Tem LeVay.
So, I am against the motion. However, given the statements that have been made by Mr. Brown, and I've heard both from Mr. Brown's side and the board, his board, and someone up here on the dais say something about needing a break. I would not want to vote on this tonight. I think we need a break maybe a couple weeks to just back off, decompress, because there's been a lot of emotional comments made up here tonight and very polarized kind of perspectives. So rather than put more pressure on us tonight to do this, Mr. Brown already said they need a break. So let's just walk away from this so that we can be a little bit more level-headed and more respectful up here on the dais. I would say just back off, whether it's until the next council meeting, or I'd be open to whatever date other colleagues want to bring up.
Okay, thank you. Anybody, you're going to have to wave at me if you want to speak. Councilmember Pryor.
Thank you. So I know I did second it, and it's because I wanted to be able to mainly discuss it, but I would not be opposed to waiting a week. I think I do want to see us be able to go into the direction where city staff and all of us are still able to communicate and potentially work together. But there is a lot to discuss on even what that looks like. And honestly, even if the LSEDC would be willing to do that, because they just said that they may not be. And I think that that's important to gauge their interest in even continuing, even if we vote yes on that tonight and it passes, they may not want to do it. So I think that it's important that we ask them as well, like, before we just.
Good point. Councilmember Lovell.
Yeah, I mean, we can have this motion, talk about it, but, I mean, if I'm, first of all, I take offense to the idea that they're here to beg for $250,000 from us. I think that's kind of inappropriate to even comment. What's the old saying? Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. We got a lot of CEOs and executives on that board that have watched us continually not do what we say we're going to do. I mean, so why would you even trust? Oh, we're going to extend it again? I think they spoke. I'm not saying we can't work with them, but I'm not sure tonight's the right time to vote on something like that. But I mean, we got some sharp business leaders out there. I mean, watch this whole thing unfold. Like, what indication would you guys have that we're going forward in good faith with this, like actually wanting to work to resolution? I mean, you hear the votes up here. I mean, you kind of know where they're going. So I don't know that this is the right time to be voting and trying to come up with a date certain. So, thanks.
Thank you. What do you think?
I don't want to get in front of it if anyone else wants to comment.
I mean, we've got a couple of waits. I could vote on it, Councilmember, if I had a time bound, but I think, I know that it's what Councilmember Pryor and Mayor Pro Tem Lopez said about waiting to make a decision. I think that's really smart. I just think that's really wise to wait. I don't see why we have to make a decision tonight. I wish they had waited to make a decision, but they didn't, and I think that was a mistake on their part, so I don't want to make the same mistake that they did. I would rather give this time. And that's not to give you guys the EDC a hard time. I think that was the wrong move. So I'd hope that you withdraw it or understand that I'd probably be voting against it because I would like to wait a week to decide. Or we don't have a meeting next week, so we'd have a couple weeks. Yeah, we'd have a couple weeks. It's going to be a long meeting, by the way. February 27th is stacked. So, but heck, I mean, Councilmember Felker and I love late meetings.
We can have one later on.
As long as you don't get us up in the morning. What are your thoughts?
Sometimes I think, well, the reason I made a motion is I felt like we were just kind of going back and forth and we weren't really saying something. I mean, I would, if we had a long enough timeline, I think then, again, a legislative body, even though we may all disagree or may not have a full agreement, our direction is given to staff, and then staff implements the direction of the council. So I guess as we talk about this and what is the future like, we may still be 5-4, whatever direction that is, yay or nay, to the EDC in 2 weeks. So, Mayor, I will, in the interest of giving us time to talk through this, I'll withdraw my motion.
Thank you, sir. All right.
Do you mind if I just say, I hope we have conversations about this and soon.
Yeah, well,
Because I think, again, we run into the same risk of,
I'll ask Ryan Head. They're asking me if Mia Pryor needs to withdraw her second. Yes, you have to.
I withdraw my second.
Okay, thank you. No, listen, I will put it on the agenda as much as this council wants. I don't want to, yeah, we can do this. There's been a lot of delays between, and there's been not a lot of communication in between, and I think that we need to think about that as we do take a break, is how are things going to change? How are things going to, or how can we get them to change? That's better, that's more appropriate. How do we get things to change so that we can move forward?
and I would just give my thought again, that if we, as council members, have not made a good faith effort to reach out and engage with members of the EDC board, then I don't think we've done our part yet at fully bringing this conversation together. And I would just invite my fellow council members to have a personal meeting with members of the EDC board and get to know them and find out what's important to them, and help and learn maybe a little more about what we can do to better move this along. So that would be my parting thought. So thank you, Mayor. I appreciate all the conversation we've had.
Thank you. Councilmember Shields, you're still on the queue. Would you like to say anything else? No? Councilmember Hodges, would you like to say anything?
So I know we keep discussing voting, which I agree for 2 weeks, kind of let things sink in and think about all that we've heard tonight. But I still, at the end of the day, we're going to throw something on the agenda in 2 weeks that we don't have an answer to. So I feel like we need to have maybe a date from you saying, yes, we'll withdraw what was said tonight, or no, it stands. Because I don't want to be mulling something over that's a waste of time either. So we need to know, where's this going? Are you even going to consider it? If not, just tell us. That's okay. That's the decision you guys have made. But we need to know, because that's another step moving forward. Okay, if it's broken, then we know that we need to start focusing elsewhere, and that's our answer and that's our direction. But if not, we need to know so we can all mull this over for the next 2 weeks and take whatever it is into consideration. So if you can maybe give us a date, I know that's hard pressed to do because you don't have your whole board here to discuss with, but.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Councilmember, I just want to point out, he doesn't have his whole board here, so.
Right, and I know that. So I know he needs to go back and speak. So I don't know if he can do email, let us know, like, hey, or whatever it is, but I do feel like we need to know that in order to know what we're going to be actually discussing or voting on, or if there's even going to be a vote at that point.
I would think, and I was talked about earlier, I mean, this was, giving feedback from 8 members of the board, which were the majority, which are the private sector business reps. In terms of the message tonight, I think we can call a board meeting then to take if they didn't watch tonight, to watch the discussion and then kind of have additional discussions. Again, there was not a whole lot of back and forth other than we're to give an update tonight, what's the direction, and the direction was we're done working on this with the city. So we can go back and have that discussion.
I come from a world that when someone says they're done, like in my the real estate world, like they say they're done, which means they take the offer off the table, but that doesn't mean you can't come back to them with a new offer. So I'm not as concerned about them saying they're done, but I think we have to take it at face value, because it's not on the table until they say it's on the table or until we make another offer to them, and then, so, it's a really good point, though. Thank you for bringing it up. Councilmember DeMoro?
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Brown, you just said that, of course, you don't have a majority of your board here. But you also said that you had 8 members of your board that have this same sentiment. And I think by the lack of attendance, it's clear to me, if no one else, that I think that there is a lack of interest to push this forward. And I don't want to assume anything, but because of the lack of attendance of the LSEDC, and you even said, I hope somebody watched it, is there any interest? I mean, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot, and whatever answer you give, or if you choose not to give an answer, that's fine too. There's no right or wrong. But is there an interest of the LSEDC board? Because, like I said, there's no attendance. I see one member, and you even said, I hope somebody watches it. Is anybody interested?
There's a couple of members, sir, just so you know.
You know, I really don't know. I think my sense from all of them was this is where they were in terms of what we communicated tonight. Some of them were harsher in letting me know how they felt and their sentiments. Others were not, so I'm going to say there's different gradations along that curve in terms of where they might be. I think that there are probably at least a couple who are very dead set, and whatever the board may do, maybe they don't want to participate anymore. And then there's probably, from there, I don't know where it goes. But I didn't, get in and quiz them kind of, where are you on that spectrum? But I mean, I'll just say, there were 8 of them, and they all communicated that was the message tonight.
That sure doesn't help me
I know.
to move forward. You know that, right?
Thank you, Mr. Brown, for your candid answer. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you for coming and presenting. You did a really good job presenting, even though I didn't like that last part. Yes.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
So I might be out of line saying this, but maybe we don't know the reason that they are just completely done. It might not have anything to do with you. And
I'm part of the board, that's
well,
what
I know, but I mean, it might not, we don't know all of the reasons that that several of the 8 members are just completely done. So I mean, I don't know, it might not be necessarily because of you,
No,
I don't know.
I'm not saying that. They made a board decision, but they excluded me. I'm on the board. I'm on the exec committee of the board, so he's on the board. He is on the board. We're looking at changing that so that you don't have to be in that position in the bylaws. But I am a stickler for the rules. I'm trying to follow the rules. I'm trying to follow the process, and then it's hard to work things out if you don't have a vote and then a discussion. And they didn't have that, so. Sorry, you still have the floor.
No, that's all, yeah, and I mean, I understand frustration all around. I understand why everyone's frustrated, which is another reason that we should give it a couple weeks to think about it, so, thank you.
Thank you. All right, I think it's almost 9 o'clock. The tow guys came just to.
5 minutes.
Just to say basically, thank you. But I got to make you guys wait another 5 or so minutes while we take a recess. I'm going to need more than 5. I really am. So it's going to be 10 minutes. We'll come back at 9 o'clock.
Welcome to the Lee Summit Sign Department. We are going to walk you through our process from start to finish. We make signs as needed here. It's not like we just go out into the field and place the speed limit sign here, no parking here. Our traffic engineers, they go through and they'll do field studies. They'll send us down an engineering work order for us to go out, place new signs or remove signs as needed. Coming from the material, our blanks come in and they're just aluminum blanks. We can put our white, our red, our fluorescent yellow, green, whatever. And basically what it looks like is just that there. Throw it up into the roller. And once we got it covered, take it to our work table here, and Tim will cut the corners, cut all the access off to where it's lined up right. As far as the plotter and the software that we use, there's a street name sign there, and he's gonna go ahead and print that out on the plotter so you can see the plotter and how it operates and runs. There's standards for the height, even just on letters on the sign blank. Basically what we have on the computer there is it's pretty much set up to those. And it goes through, it's got a very small but sharp needle that goes through and cuts everything out letter by letter. Once that's done cutting, our next stage would be bringing it over here. Currently picking out the sign letters right now. We call it weeding or picking or however you want to call it. Next, putting it on the transfer tape. Then after it's taped, we bring it over to the roller. That's where we apply it to the actual sign blank. And we'll roll it through one time just to get the air bubbles out. And the last stage is basically just taking the transfer tape off the front of it. And there's a finished product of the street name sign. We'll take you out to the field and show you our process that we go through. We're gonna go out and follow our sign guys, get something installed for you. This is where we check our underground utilities. Tim, you got AT&T?
AT&T's back here.
Evergy, Google, so we should be good to go. We normally put all of our stuff together out in the field. Then once the base is installed, we'll go ahead and put the post in there. We've come up to perfect. And that's how we do it. Simple, quick.
Traditionally, we think as police officers, those responding to law enforcement needs within the community. But honestly, we are there to serve our citizens, and our citizens do go into crisis. They do have mental health crises, and we're being called to those scenes on a regular basis. In order to help serve those citizens better, we did initiate the Crisis Intervention Team Program. These are officers that are specially trained to de-escalate crisis situations. Recently, we've brought co-responders onto the scene, licensed qualified mental health professionals housed within our police department, and they respond with those officers directly to those scenes where a crisis is occurring so they can interact with that citizen and get them the help they need right there on that scene.
The co-responders are either bachelor or master level in a behavioral health related field. They wear plain clothes, they don't carry weapons or anything like that.
I have a police radio that I listen to all day. Listen for, those key words, mental health, behavioral health, crisis.
There's a lot of officers that just call for me. I have my own radio number.
I also have the ability to self-dispatch to them and say 982's en route.
Officers en route, 914, Armstrong.
So typically I arrive after they've made it safe. I'll make contact and get kind of the rundown, and then I just kind of jump right in.
Like, hey, my name's Allison. I'm a mental health professional. I'm here to help you. I'm not here to take you to jail or arrest you.
Sometimes all a person needs is a voice, someone neutral, someone outside that, can listen. I do a lot of safety planning, including family, their support network. Who's close to you? If they're home alone, who can come over and hang out with you today? Can we lock away your sharps? Can we put up your meds? Do you need meds? Can we get you over to the urgent care to get you assessed for your medications? Some of them also are like, oh, I'm so glad you came. This made me feel so much better.
Our main goal as co-responders is to, one, get people connected to the services that they need, and also divert from emergency rooms and jails.
And they almost get a different view of the police responding. That lets me know you care and the officers care.
Please, please, how can we help you?
My husband has...
In 2020, we had 722 mental health-related calls for service. 2022, by that time, 1,479. These mental health-related calls for service are increasing. How we're responding to that is increasing the number of crisis intervention team officers we have available, as well as the number of co-responders we have available to respond on these calls.
So what I think is important for the community to know about the co-responder program is that we're here, we exist. All you have to do when you call 911 is ask for us. You know, say, hey, I want a co-responder to respond to this crisis, and we'll go. I was really struggling about 8 years ago on my personal journey with mental health, and I met some amazing social workers and amazing programs that have helped me get to where I am today. I really couldn't see myself doing anything else. We want to help, and that's what we love to do.
So I had a client, we got a call, she had some suicidal ideations, and she really felt that she had nobody. And you know, and getting to know her story and getting to know who comes around and sees you, well then we found a support person and they responded immediately. And we made a plan. I called back and checked on her in an hour, and then I checked on her in 2 hours. We were able to get her into the additional services to where she talks to someone every week or more. I just took a person that really just thought they had nobody and nobody would show up for them, and show them you do. And you'll be amazed who is in your corner if you just simply say, I need a little help.
When the person called on the phone, she said that there was a dinosaur walking down her road. Of course, we had to go out and check that out. We get out there, and it was a big African tortoise, probably 60 pounds, walking down the road. When they walk, they really stand up tall, so I could see why she thought it was a dinosaur. I'm Rodney Wagner. I'm the manager of Lee's Summit Animal Control. So as you can see, we get all sorts of animals here. You got some guinea pigs off to the side. All the windows up here are animals that are adoptable right now. Every one of these dogs is ready to go and ready for adoption. And the same thing with our cats over here. A lot of cool cats in here now, so this is our 3-acre lot we have out back. And this is where we do all the walking of dogs, exercise. We also have a side yard off to the side over there, so we can let them run loose. They can run together, and we have what's called play groups. Kind of like having a bunch of kids. Here's our vet room. We have a vet that comes out twice a week. This is our Sally Port where we bring the animals into. This is one of our animal control trucks, and we can hold up to 6 animals. We have a lift on the other side to put big animals in. We actually have temperature gauges in here and in the truck to tell us how hot it is. Once it gets to a certain temperature, we bring all the animals back here immediately. So this actually has traps in it, but we do a lot of wildlife trapping. I mean, a lot. So bats, potbelly pigs, horses, cows, emus, a lot of reptiles. We had a citizen one time that had over 200 reptiles in his basement. Caimans and alligators in here that are 4 or 5 feet long. You can't keep those. And people do, and they're surprised when they can't keep them. I'm like, really? You're surprised you can't have an alligator in your house? Our main goal here is public safety and also the safety of the animals. And we have very dedicated people back there, and they definitely stay here for the love of the animals, which also includes getting them adopted out. We'll have about 4,000 impounded animals a year. Probably about close to 2,000 are dogs and cats. The cats and dogs, when they get impounded here, they go on a 5-day hold. And then after the 5 days, if the owner doesn't show up, then we can put them up for adoption. To adopt an animal here is actually really simple. You just come in, look for whatever animal you're looking for, find the right pick. You go to the adoption room up there and see if you get along with them. You spend as much time as you want to in there. From that point on, it's just a matter of making sure they're spay or neutered and all their vaccinations up to par and they're good to go. We have a very high adoption rate because we try everything in our power to get animals adopted out. We have Heart of America Humane Society that we do a lot of adoptions through. And then we also have other groups. We have some people that literally will just look all over the country for somewhere for a dog to go. And we sent dogs up into South Dakota, North Dakota, Washington State. So it's actually, it's a huge united effort to get all these animals home.
Tarzan's got lots of energy. Hazel's got a weird meow. Belle, she wants nothing to do with the other cats. She'll kind of get her grumpy face going.
And the good thing about the people here is that they get all their friends to get animals too. All of us have probably the limit of all the animals that we can have at home. You know, they are huge animal lovers. If it was up to the people here, we'd have 15 cats running around in here. We had a citizen one time out there and he was bathing his two 9-foot-long boa constrictors in the front yard. Apparently that was garnering some attention, and so we went out there and had to have a talk with him about that. Why do I do this job? Oh, dude, I love this job. I grew up on a farm, and taking care of that many animals, you can't help but like animals. This is just like fancy farming. You know, you're just bringing animals in here, taking care of them, and find them homes, and yeah, absolutely animal lover.
I'm Assistant Chief Jim Eden.
And I'm Battalion Chief Ben Hicks.
And today we're at Lee Summit Fire Station 3. Fire Station 3 was part of the 2016 no tax increase general obligation bond for public safety initiatives. The station was built and occupied in August of 2020. Unfortunately, due to the pandemic, we've not been able to give tours or have an actual ribbon cutting. So we want to invite you in today to give you the opportunity to see what goes on within a Lee Summit Fire Department station.
Let's go take a tour. This is our admin side of the facility. We use this side.
Okay, everyone, welcome back. We're going to bring this meeting back to order. We are on agenda item 7A. This is proposed ordinances forwarded from committee. Councilmember Shields, would you please read Bill number 24-017?
Thank you, Mayor. Move for second reading of Bill number 24-017, an ordinance approving the award of RFP number 2024-022 for tow services for a one-year term with up to 4 one-year renewals to James R. McCoy LLC, DBA Jim's Tow Service as a primary awardee and Ron's Auto and Tow Truck Towing LLC as a secondary awardee, and authorizing city manager to execute the same by and on behalf of the city.
Thank you. We have a motion to adopt, no, motion to move to second reading, right? Yes. Yeah, motion to move to second reading, Bill number 24-017 by Councilmember Shields, seconded by Councilmember Hodges. Discussion? Yes, Councilmember Felker.
Thank you, Mayor. I would be recusing myself from this vote based on a conflict of interest.
Thank you, sir. Any other discussion? Seeing none, please cast your vote. All votes are in. Please record the vote. Does move to second reading unanimously. Councilmember Shields, would you please?
Thank you, Mayor. I now move for adoption of Bill number 24-017, an ordinance approving the award of RFP number 2024-022 for tow services for a one-year term with up to 4 one-year renewals to James R. McCoy LLC, DBA Jim's Tow Service as the primary awardee, and Ron's Auto and Tow Truck Towing LLC as the secondary awardee, and authorize city manager to execute the same by and on behalf of the city.
Thank you. I have a motion to adopt Bill number 24-017 by Councilmember Shields, seconded by Councilmember Pryor. And we had Councilmember Shields read this just for you guys, so you would know just how good we are up here. I have discussion with Councilmember Shields.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to say that this did go back to Finance and Budget Committee, and I wanted to thank staff for the excellent work that they did, clarifying some questions that members of council had, making sure that we were all clear on the insurance provisions and the subcontractor provisions and everything. And I think all the concerns were well answered, and I appreciate their hard work. So thank you.
Thank you. I can't remember if I said out loud. Councilmember Pryor has a second on that. Discussion? Please cast your vote. All votes are in. Please record the vote. It's adopted unanimously. So thank you again for coming in. We are on agenda item 8, I think. No, we're still on 7B. Councilmember Edson, bill number 24-022, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I move for second reading in bill number 24-022, an ordinance approving amendment number 9 to the budget for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2024, as adopted by ordinance number 9704, ordinance number 9705, ordinance number 9706, ordinance number 9707, and ordinance number 9708 by amending the authorized expenditures for the city.
Thank you. We have a motion to move to second reading, bill number 24-022 by Councilmember Edson, seconded by Councilmember Shields. Discussion? Seeing none, please cast your vote. All votes are in. Please record the vote. It moves to second reading unanimously. Councilmember Edson, would you please?
Thank you, Mayor. I move for adoption of bill number 24-022, an ordinance approving amendment number 9 to the budget for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2024, as adopted by ordinance number 9704, ordinance number 9705, ordinance number 9706, ordinance number 9707, and ordinance number 9708 by amending the authorized expenditures for the city.
Thank you. We have a motion to adopt bill number 24-022 by Councilmember Edson, seconded by Councilmember DeMauro. Discussion? Please cast your vote. All votes are in. Please record the vote. It's adopted unanimously. Thank you. Councilmember DeMauro, would you please read bill number 24-023?
Thank you, Mayor. I move to advance bill number 24-023 to second reading, an ordinance approving amendment number 10 to the budget for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2024, as adopted by ordinance number 9704, ordinance 9705, ordinance 9706, ordinance number 9707, and ordinance number 9708 by amending the authorized expenditures for the city.
Thank you. We have a motion to move to second reading, bill number 24-023 by Councilmember DeMauro, seconded by Councilmember Felker. Discussion? Yes, Mayor Protem Lopez.
Mayor, I will be recusing from this one.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Seeing none, please cast your vote. All votes are in. Please record the vote. Passes 8-0 with the recusal. Councilmember DeMauro, would you please?
I move for adoption, bill number 24-023, an ordinance approving amendment number 10 to the budget for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2024, as adopted by ordinance 9704, ordinance number 9705, ordinance number 9706, ordinance number 9707, ordinance number 9708 by amending the authorized expenditures for the city.
Thank you. We have a motion to adopt bill number 24-023 by Councilmember DeMauro, seconded by Councilmember Hodges. Discussion? Please cast your vote. All votes are in. Please record the vote. 8-0 with a recusal. Thank you. And proposed ordinance's first reading. Councilmember Lovell, would you please read bill number 24-024?
I move to advance second reading bill number 24-024, an ordinance authorizing the issuance, sale, and delivery of not to exceed $27,500,000 principal amount of general obligation bond series 2024A and authorizing certain other documents and actions by the city.
Thank you. We have a motion to adopt bill number 24-024 by Councilmember Lovell, seconded by Councilmember Hodges. Discussion? Oh, this is first reading, so this is moving it to second reading. Bill number 24-024 by Councilmember Lovell, seconded by Councilmember Hodges. Thank you. Discussion? Yes, Councilmember Felker.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate that in the packet there's some, I wonder if, Ms. Wordleman, if you wouldn't mind just kind of walking through this for the sake of the public knows what we're doing here. You know, even just the process, I think it's helpful to kind of walk through it. I'm looking at the transaction calendar and perhaps some of the other documents that are just helpful to see, okay, this is a big matter that voters said yes to, and so knowing what's ahead of us.
Betty Whirlman, Finance Director. So this is to authorize our first issuance of bonds under the newly approved voter authorization from 2023, where the voters authorized 3 different categories of bonds: transportation, general public safety, and general municipal. Total of $186 million among those 3 ballot issues. This particular issuance is applying under the question 1, $14 million, question 2, $12 million, and question 3, $4 million. So we have various projects that were a part of the plan for that $186 million total issuance. So we have, staff has worked to outline a timeline for various projects to encompass all of that $186 million. So there's about 10 to 12 projects that are being funded with this particular issuance as our first in the series. This issuance is being done on a competitive basis, which is, I think, the first one we've done since 2017. Part of the reason for doing it competitively is because of the size of this one. Several of our last few issuances have been $5 to $10 million, so that with the size of this, it warrants more of a competitive issuance process. And our financial advisors, Columbia Capital Management, who we have Jim Pritchard, I believe, on Zoom available if there's any questions. They monitor the markets, and they have recommended that we do a competitive process on this as well, based upon market conditions. We do have a calendar, and as you indicated, that calendar indicates that we will actually do competitive bidding on March 12th, and we expect to close right around, it's March 28th is the scheduled closing on these, which meaning that's when funds would actually become available to us. The city has already initiated some activity on some of these projects. We had a reimbursement resolution that we passed back in January, so that we are able to reimburse ourselves from the proceeds of the bond issue. I guess I can add that we have a planned maintenance of our debt levy, our debt service levy, which is part of our property tax levy that services the required repayment of these bonds. And as we promised the voters, I believe it was the 2021 election, where the voters approved a 10% general operating levy increase in return for the city committing to maintaining our debt service levy at a reduced amount of the same level, 10 cents reduction. So at that time, we reduced our debt levy from 0.4697 to 0.3697. And with the growth in assessed valuations, that continues to provide us with enough revenues from the debt levy to service the debt. And so we are structuring our debt as we issue it to maintain the amount of revenues coming in at that 0.3697 level to provide enough funding to pay off the debt as we're structuring it. We do have a tentatively planned structure on this issue that will allow for us to continue to issue more debt in the near term as we undertake more of those projects going forward.
Okay, and that last point. So this issuance would remain, well, I'll use the word static, meaning if it's been, once we close on it, those bonds are issued, new bonds are issued sometime later, a different calendar you're not putting in front of us right now, beyond the $27.5 million, and that's going to, you'll be structuring it then as well. It's kind of similar kind of process.
Yes. We plan to issue additional bonds as we need the cash available to fund the projects.
Oh, one more question, just for mention, this is a competitive process in this, but then other issuances, because they're smaller, I'd love to have a small $5 to $10 million issuance of anything in my personal life, but sorry. Why, what's the difference or distinction? What's not competitive about the other process?
So the last few issues that we've done, we were basically issuing debt based upon small parcels of remaining authorization from past ballot issues. And so we relied upon our financial advisor to assess the conditions of the market. And so the decision basically settles on cost of issuance, so it's cheaper to do a non-competitive issuance. So for a smaller issue, sometimes it makes more sense to do a non-competitive issuance. Also, those recent issues were very, very short-term. We paid off one of those within a year, and I think another one we paid off within 2 years. So when it's a very short-term issuance, very small, it's just not worth the cost of issuance and the going through the process. Those interest rates on those very short-term issuances were, as I recall, probably less than 2%.
So the idea is, with the smaller issuances, our advisor kind of sets the rate, and we're,
The advisor doesn't necessarily set the rate. They go out on the market looking for interested investors.
okay.
So it's still, there's still
Still
somewhat
some
of a
element of
competition to
competition.
it.
They're still looking, but they don't perhaps publicize it. Is that the difference?
Right,
They're-
right. You don't put it out there like a bid and allow people to competitively price, sort of like an auction process in a sense. The financial advisor goes out and seeks interest from potential investors and then brings forward to us what he believes to be the best option for us.
Yeah, great. This has been, appreciate the discussion. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Good job, Ms. Wertelman. The discussion, please cast your vote. All votes are in. Please record the vote. Move to second reading unanimously. Thank you. Committee reports. Yes, Councilmember DeMoro.
Thank you, Mayor. Yesterday, noontime, we had a legislative and intergovernmental relations committee meeting. We discussed some legislative updates with our lobbyists, two of them. I can only remember one of their names, Mr. Pollock, Zach Pollock. Had some good questions for him, and he gave us some good answers. The other item was the paint recycling program. That's actually legislation going through the Missouri legislature, and we gave a head nod to that. That was a good program. Then yesterday afternoon we had a public works meeting, and we had an extension on the crack and seal FY24 program for about 18 days because they ran into some moisture and they can't put the crack seal down when the pavement is wet. We also, let's see, there's going to be a large expansion. You probably see some construction at the water utilities building. They're going to actually have a new building, construction building for sensitive equipment, to say the least. I mean, put the equipment under cover. And then there were a couple of sewer items. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Shields.
Thank you, Mayor. We're going to have a special meeting of the Finance and Budget Committee this Friday at noon via Zoom. I would certainly encourage the members of the committee to take a look at the packet ahead of time. The city manager has put forth the proposed funding priorities, so it'll be a good chance for us to discuss those and figure out how we want to allocate that. I want to call it budget surplus, but that's not right. The fund balance, yeah, reserve balance. Sorry, it's kind of late in the evening. So look forward to that meeting. I think it's going to be a great discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Edson.
Thank you, Mayor. We have CEDC tomorrow night at 5 o'clock here.
Good, thank you. Councilmember Felker.
Rules Committee, Thursday, 11:30, should be short. On Zoom.
Thank you. Comments? Prior.
I just wanted to say that, so yesterday during our legislative meeting, we got to have a conversation with our new lobbyists, and I really like them. They were very informative, and I just really like them, so that's all. And Cookie Jar Bakery tonight made cookies for our council dinner, and they were really good, so support them locally. Thanks.
Felker.
Promise this will be short, but I just want to say I appreciate being able to have a conversation as a council. I appreciate it. And thank you, Mayor, for leading that conversation. I'm grateful we can sometimes disagree. I think it's great. And we'll try to work towards solutions. Thank you.
We're going to miss you, man. Talk him into running again someday. All right. I would say we have MML next week, Mr. Dunning. So few council members and I are going, Mayor Protem I think is going to Jefferson City, and we'll meet with our representatives and senators. And I always say we make friends. Make, small asks, or sometimes big asks. One time we got $20 million, or how much did we get that one year? 10.5 million. One year we got 10.5 million, but there was a bunch of funds, extra funds. So let's go work that and then come back and report back to council how that went. Staff roundtable.
Thank you, Mayor. Under staff roundtable, there's a written report from the Eastern Jackson County Shared Services Initiatives. That's the Eastern Jackson County communities, 5 communities just working together on shared initiatives such as supervisory training and things of that nature where all municipalities can benefit from coming together. Noted in there, so this is like their annual report for 2023. Noted in there is starting discussions on impacts that the World Cup may have on the community. So a lot of good dialogue forthcoming on that. Housing affordability is one that is of interest and focus. And you just mentioned some of the legislative priorities for Eastern Jackson County. So those are some of the things that the Shared Services Initiative and for the most part, the city managers get together and collaborate on. So wanted to bring that to your attention. A couple other quick topics. So the Jackson County Circuit Court has announced that court is closed tomorrow. So our municipal court will be closed tomorrow for, I guess we'll call it the Red Snow Day. And then the last thing, kind of tying into the parade, our Lee Summit Fire Department, Lee Summit Police Department will be allocating resources to assist with that. That will not jeopardize our ability to do the things we need to do here in Lee Summit, though. So I wanted to make that very clear. But we are assisting with some resources to assist with that celebration, we'll call it, that I know we're all proud of. So that's it, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, seeing no further business, I'm going to adjourn this meeting at 9:24.